The silhouette of a lone wagon appeared stark against the crimson sunset, its broken wheel jutting out like a fractured bone. Emma Wilson's eyelids fluttered open, the metallic taste of blood lingering on her cracked lips. Pain radiated from somewhere deep within her skull, pulsing in rhythm with her racing heart. She tried to move, but her limbs felt weighted, disconnected from her will. Snow fell silently around her, each flake melting as it touched her feverish skin. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. She couldn't remember anything, not how she came to be here, not why her body ached as though she'd been trampled by horses, not even her own name. Fragments of images flashed across her mind. Laughter, gunfire, screaming, then darkness. Nothing connected, nothing made sense. The bodies scattered. Around the massacre site told a story she couldn't decipher, their frozen faces locked in expressions of terror. Blood had turned the snow beneath them into a grotesque pink slush. Emma's fingers trembled as they reached for a locket dangling from her neck, its golden surface stained with dried blood. Inside, a small portrait of a man with kind eyes and a gentle smile. She traced his face, waiting for recognition, for memory, for anything. Nothing came, just the howling wind, the approaching night, and the knowledge that if she stayed here, she would die before dawn. A sound caught her attention, hoofbeats, approaching through the swirling snow. Fear gripped her chest as she struggled to crawl behind the overturned wagon, each movement sending waves of agony through her battered body. The world spun around her, darkness creeping at the edges of her vision. The last thing she saw before consciousness slipped away was a figure dismounting from a painted horse, face lined with wisdom and concern, hands outstretched, not in threat, but in offering. The winter of 1873 had been particularly brutal in Dakota Territory. Blizzards swept across the plains with unrelenting fury, burying the landscape under feet of snow and freezing anything that dared remain exposed. It was in this merciless cold that Singing Bird found the dying white woman, half buried in snow beside the remnants of a wagon train massacre. Singing Bird had not been searching for survivors. She had been gathering pine needles for medicine, traveling farther from her people's winter encampment than usual. The massacre site appeared suddenly through a break in the swirling snow. 7 wagons overturned, their contents scattered like entrails across the blood-stained ground. Bodies lay where they had fallen, already stiffening in the frigid air, their eyes gazing sightlessly at the iron-gray sky. Among the dead, a single flutter of movement. A woman, barely alive, her golden hair matted with blood, her skin blue-tinged, but still warm. Something in Singing Bird's heart shifted as she knelt beside the stranger. In her 60 winters, she had seen enough of white settlers to know caution, to know distance. But the woman's unseeing eyes held no hatred, no judgment, only pain and confusion. "You walk between worlds," Singing Bird murmured in her native tongue, pressing weathered fingers against the woman's throat to feel the faint pulse still stubbornly beating there. Not yet ready for the spirit path. The decision came without hesitation. Singing Bird whistled softly, calling her horse closer. With strength belying her age, she hoisted the unconscious woman onto the animal's back, securing her with leather straps before mounting behind her. The woman's skin burned with fever despite the cold, her breathing shallow and irregular. The journey back to the Lakota winter encampment took longer than usual, the added weight and treacherous conditions slowing their progress. Night had fallen. By the time the glowing fires of the camp appeared through the trees, dogs barked an alert as Singing Bird approached, their voices drawing others from the warmth of their teepees. Chief Grey Wolf was the first to step forward, his face hardening as he recognized Singing Bird's burden. "What is this you bring to our home?" he asked, his voice as cold as the wind that whipped around them. "A life," Singing Bird answered simply. "One that was not ready to end." Other members of the tribe gathered around, murmuring among themselves. Some looked concerned, others suspicious, a few openly hostile. Singing Bird understood their fear. Relations with white settlers had grown, increasingly tense as more wagons pushed into their territory each season, bringing disease, alcohol, and an insatiable hunger for land. "She is one of those who take and never give back," a warrior called from the crowd. "Let her fate find her." "I have made my decision," Singing Bird replied, her voice carrying authority earned through decades as the tribe's medicine woman. "This woman will stay in my lodge until she walks or dies. The spirits guided me to her for a purpose." Chief Grey Wolf studied the unconscious woman for a long moment, his expression unreadable in the flickering firelight. Finally, he gave a single nod. "She is your responsibility, Singing Bird. If she brings harm to our people, that harm is on your hands." "I accept this," Singing Bird said, already urging her horse toward her teepee at the eastern edge of the camp. Morning Star, Singing Bird's daughter, rushed forward to help, her face tight with concern, but asking no questions as they gently lowered the stranger onto a bed of buffalo robes inside the warmth of their dwelling. The unconscious woman moaned softly as they removed her blood-soaked clothing, revealing a body mapped with bruises and a deep gash across her temple. "Mother, she is badly wounded," Morningstar whispered, her hands hovering uncertainly above the injuries. "Her head, yes. The shadow walks in her mind," Singing Bird confirmed, pressing experienced fingers gently along the woman's skull. "But it is not her time. Bring me my medicine bundle and heat water." Through the night, Singing Bird worked tirelessly. She cleaned the wound on the woman's temple, applying a poultice of crushed herbs and pine resin. She massaged healing oils into the bruised flesh, sang the ancient songs of healing as she worked, and dripped herbal teas between the woman's parched lips. Morning Star assisted silently, her young face solemn in the dim light of the fire. Dawn was breaking when the woman's eyes finally opened, wild with terror and confusion. She thrashed weakly against Singing Bird's restraining hands, incomprehensible sounds escaping her throat. "Be still," Singing Bird said in halting English, words learned from traders over the years. "Safe. You safe here." The woman's struggles ceased, her gaze darting around the unfamiliar surroundings, the smoke hole at the teepee's peak, the flickering fire, the hanging bundles of herbs, the faces of Singing Bird and Morning Star watching her with cautious concern. "Who?" the woman croaked, her voice cracking with disuse and thirst. "Who am I?" Singing Bird and Morning Star exchanged glances of surprise. The medicine woman leaned closer, studying the woman's eyes. "You not know your name?" The woman's face crumpled, tears welling up and spilling down her pale cheeks. "I don't remember anything, nothing." Her hand went to the locket still hanging around her neck, fingers trembling as they traced its surface. "Who am I? What happened to me? I find you, with dead people. Wagons broken," Singing Bird explained slowly, her limited English strained, by the complexity of what she needed to convey. "You hurt, head hurt. Sometimes head injury take memories." The woman closed her eyes, tears continuing to leak from beneath her lids. "Will they come back? My memories?" Singing Bird placed a weathered hand on the woman's shoulder. "Maybe yes, maybe no. Medicine say wait. Body heal first, then maybe mind." For 3 days, the woman drifted between consciousness and fevered. Dreams, crying out at times in terror at phantoms only she could see. Singing Bird remained vigilant, applying fresh poultices, brewing strengthening teas, and singing the healing songs passed down through generations of her people. Morning Star helped by changing the sweat-soaked bedding and spooning broth into the woman during her lucid moments. On the 4th day, the fever broke. The woman sat up on her own, her eyes clearer than they had been, though the confusion remained. She accepted a wooden cup of broth from Morning Star with shaking hands. "Thank you," she whispered. "Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. For saving me, for caring for me." Singing Bird nodded, her dark eyes studying the woman intently. "You stronger now? Need name?" The woman looked down at the locket she still wore. She opened it again, studying the man's face inside. Something about his eyes seemed familiar, like a word on the tip of her tongue that refused to form. "Emma," she said suddenly, the name rising from some hidden recess of her mind. I think my name might be Emma." "Emma," Singing Bird repeated, testing the sound of it. "Good name, strong name." She placed her hand over her own heart. "I am Singing Bird. This my daughter, Morning Star." The young woman offered a tentative smile, which Emma returned weakly. It was the first step toward trust, toward healing. As the days passed, Emma grew stronger physically, though her memories remained locked away. The gash on her temple healed to an angry red line, and the worst of her bruises faded from purple to yellow. She learned to communicate with Singing Bird and Morning Star through a combination of simple English, gestures, and a growing vocabulary of Lakota words. But the rest of the tribe maintained their distance, watching her with wary eyes whenever she ventured outside the teepee. Children were hurried away when she approached. Warriors placed themselves between her and the women, gathering firewood or preparing food. The message was clear. She was tolerated, not accepted. Chief Grey Wolf visited once, standing tall at the entrance to Singing Bird's teepee, his face impassive as he studied Emma. "Has she remembered?" he asked Singing Bird in their language. "No," the medicine woman replied. "The blow to her head was severe. The memories may never return." "Perhaps that is a blessing," the chief said cryptically before departing. Emma understood none of the words, but the tone and the chief's penetrating gaze left her uneasy. "They don't want me here," she said to Singing Bird later that evening as they sat beside the fire. Singing Bird did not deny it. "My people have suffered much from your people," she explained simply. "Broken promises, stolen land, sickness, death." "I'm sorry," Emma whispered, though the guilt she felt was abstract, disconnected from any specific memory of wrongdoing. "You not responsible for all white actions," Singing Bird said, her weathered hand patting Emma's, "but understand their fear." As January gave way to February, Emma began to contribute to the daily work of the camp, eager to repay the kindness shown to her. She learned to scrape hides under Morning Star's patient instruction, to gather the right types of wood for the fire, to stitch together pieces of leather into useful items. The physical activity seemed to help her healing body, even as her mind remained shrouded in fog. Singing Bird dedicated time each day to treating Emma's head injury with specialized techniques. She applied heated stones to specific points on Emma's body, created smoke from sacred herbs that Emma breathed deeply, and led her through chanted meditations designed to bridge the gap between the physical and spiritual worlds. "Memory-like, scattered beads," the medicine woman explained. "Need to find thread to connect them again." Occasionally, fragments would surface. The smell of baking bread triggering a flash of a warm kitchen, the sound of a child's laughter in the camp bringing tears to her eyes without understanding why. Each fragment was precious, but none connected. To form a complete picture of who she had been, the locket remained her most tangible link to her past. Emma spent hours staring at the portrait inside, willing herself to remember the man's name, the sound of his voice, anything about him beyond the strange ache his image produced in her heart. "Husband," Singing Bird said one evening, observing. Emma's fixation on the locket. I think. Emma touched the man's painted face. Why wasn't he with me? Why can't I remember him? Singing Bird had no answers, only more questions. What happened to Wagon people? Why you only survivor? Who attack? These questions haunted Emma's dreams, transforming them into nightmares of shadowy figures, screams, and blood spattering across snow. She would wake, gasping, drenched in sweat, fragments of the massacre teasing the edges of her consciousness before slipping away like smoke. The first real breakthrough came when a trading party returned to the camp in late February. Among them was a young warrior named Running Fox, who brought news that made the entire camp buzz with tension. "White men are searching the territory," he reported to Chief Grey Wolf in a council that Singing Bird was summoned to attend. "They say a wagon or train was attacked by our people. They seek revenge for their dead." Murmurs of anger and denial swept through the gathered tribal leaders. Chief Grey Wolf raised his hand for silence. "Tell me everything you heard," he commanded. Running Fox described the rumors spreading through the territory. A wagon train of 7 families had been massacred near Black Eagle Valley. The attack was being blamed on the Lakota, though no survivors remained to tell what truly happened. A militia was forming in Whispering Pines settlement, led by a man named Samuel Blackwood, who owned much of the land in the region. "They use this as excuse," one elder spat. "Always they seek reason to attack, to push us from our lands." "We were not responsible," Chief Grey Wolf stated firmly. "Our hunters were to the north that day. None of our warriors were near Black Eagle Valley." Singing Bird listened with growing concern, her thoughts turning to the woman recovering in her teepee. Emma, the survivor no one knew existed. When the council ended, Singing Bird approached Chief Grey Wolf privately. "The woman I saved," she said quietly. "She was from this wagon train." The chief's expression darkened. "You are certain?" "Yes. I found her among the dead at Black Eagle Valley." Grey Wolf was silent for a long moment. "She has seen the faces of those who attacked. If her memory returns, she could clear our people of blame," Singing Bird finished. "Or confirm it, if our warriors acted without the council's knowledge," the chief countered. "Either way, she is now more dangerous than before." "Or more valuable," Singing Bird argued. "She is the only one who knows the truth." Grey Wolf considered this. "For now, say nothing to the others. The woman stays with you, and you will work harder to restore her memory. We must know what she saw before these white militiamen find her." Singing Bird returned to her teepee, troubled by the conversation. Emma sat cross-legged on the floor, teaching Morning Star a string game from her childhood. A memory that had surfaced that morning, disconnected from any context, but bringing Emma a small moment of joy. Looking at her now, Singing Bird felt the weight of responsibility. Emma had become more than a patient. She had become something like family. The thought of using her, of pushing her traumatized mind for information that might reopen her wounds, sat uneasily with the medicine woman. But that night, as Emma thrashed in the grip of another nightmare, Singing Bird made her decision. She gathered special herbs from her medicine bundle, ones reserved for the most sacred of healing ceremonies. Tomorrow, they would journey to Medicine Bluff, the place of vision and remembering. "We go to sacred place," she told Emma at dawn. "Place where spirits speak clearer, may help you remember." Emma nodded, determination in her eyes despite the fear that flickered there. "I want to remember. I need to know who I am." What she didn't say, what both women understood, was that remembering might mean leaving. If Emma recovered her past, there would be no reason for her to remain with the people who had saved her. The thought brought a surprising pang of sadness. They set out as the sun rose, bundled against the cold in fur-lined buckskin, riding, singing. Birds paintmare through snow-covered valleys and stands of pine. Morning Star remained behind, tasked with explaining their absence to any who asked. The journey to Medicine Bluff took most of the day, the terrain growing steeper as they approached. Singing Bird pointed out landmarks as they traveled, naming them in both English and Lakota, sharing the stories associated with each place. Emma absorbed it all, asking questions, showing genuine interest in the culture that had sheltered her. "My people come here for many generations," Singing Bird explained as they finally reached the base of a towering sandstone bluff marked with ancient pictographs, "Place of power, place of truth." They made camp in a sheltered hollow, building a small fire that would not be visible from a distance. After a simple meal of pemmican and dried berries, Singing Bird began the preparations for the ceremony, arranging stones in a specific pattern around the fire, burning bundles of sage and sweetgrass, and mixing herbs into a strong-smelling tea. As darkness fell, she handed Emma the wooden cup. "Drink, open mind to spirits, may help remember." Emma hesitated only briefly before drinking the bitter liquid. The effect was not immediate. They sat in silence as the fire crackled and stars appeared in the clear night sky. Singing Bird began to chant softly, a melodic, repetitive sound that seemed to match the rhythm of the flickering flames. Emma closed her eyes, allowing the sound to wash over her. The tea's effects began to manifest gradually. First a tingling warmth spreading through her limbs, then a curious lightening of her thoughts, as though her mind was floating free from her body. Images began to form behind her closed eyelids, not fragmented flashes as before, but complete scenes playing out with vivid clarity. She saw herself in a modest home, kneading bread dough beside a cast-iron stove. A man entered, the man from the locket, smiling as he removed his hat, Nathan. His name was Nathan Wilson, and he was her husband of 3 years. "We're really doing this, Emma?" he asked, excitement and anxiety mingling in his voice, "leaving everything behind." The scene shifted. A group of wagons circled around a campfire, families sharing a meal, children playing between the wheels, men discussing the trail ahead. She knew these people. The Millers, with their 5 rambunctious children, the elderly Thorntons who bickered constantly but couldn't bear to be apart, young newlyweds James and Sarah Collins, the widower Reverend Parker with his medical bag, and Bible, and watching from the edge of the camp, a man with cold eyes, Samuel Blackwood, the land developer who had convinced them all to settle in Dakota territory. "The most fertile soil you'll ever plow," his voice echoed in her memory, "smooth as oil and twice as slick, for those brave enough to claim it." Another shift, snow falling, the wagons struggling through a narrow pass, Nathan riding ahead to scout, hours passing with no sign of his return, worry gnawing at her stomach. Then shouts, gunfire, not Indians, as she'd initially feared, but white men with covered faces. Men who moved with purpose, who knew exactly what they were looking for. The Thorntons fell first, then Reverend Parker as he tried to reason with the attackers. Emma had grabbed a rifle, fired at a masked figure advancing on the Collins wagon. The man had dropped, cursing. Samuel Blackwood's voice cutting through the chaos. "Find the map." Wilson had it. Emma running, the map tucked inside her bodice. Nathan had entrusted it to her before riding ahead, a map to the gold deposit they discovered while hunting, the true reason for their journey west. A horse bearing down on her, pain exploding in her head, darkness. Emma gasped, her eyes flying, open as the memories flooded back with such force that she physically recoiled. "Nathan!" she cried out, tears streaming down her face. "Oh God, Nathan!" Singing Bird moved closer, placing steadying hands on Emma's shoulders. "You remember now?" "Yes," Emma whispered, her voice breaking. "Everything. It wasn't Indians. Who attacked us? It was Samuel Blackwood and his men. He wanted a map my husband had made, a map to a gold deposit we found." Her hand went to her chest, searching frantically inside her clothing. "The map. I had it. It was hidden. When I find you, only clothes and locket," Singing Bird said gently. "No map." Emma's mind raced. They must have found it after I was unconscious. They thought I was dead. A new thought struck her, even more painful than the last. Nathan. He wasn't with the wagons. He rode ahead to scout the pass. He could still be alive. Hope and grief warred in her expression. If Nathan had returned to find the massacre, would he have searched for her body? Would he have assumed she was dead? Or would he still be looking for her? If husband live, he search for you. Singing, Bird said, as if reading her thoughts. And if Blackwood knows he's alive, he'll hunt him down, Emma replied, a new urgency in her voice. I need to find Nathan before Blackwood does. The medicine woman nodded slowly. First, we return to camp. Tell Chief Grey Wolf what you remember. Clear my people of blame. Then we make plan. They doused the fire and slept fitfully until dawn. Emma's mind too full of recovered memories to find true rest. With first light, they began the journey back to the winter encampment, pushing their horse to a faster pace than they had traveled the day before. They were halfway back when Singing Bird suddenly reined in the horse, her body tensing. Emma, riding behind her, felt the change immediately. What is it? She whispered. Singing Bird pointed silently to a column of smoke rising above the tree. Line, thick black smoke, too much for a cooking fire. It came from the direction of the Lakota camp. Without a word, Singing Bird urged the horse forward, no longer following the trail, but cutting directly through the underbrush. Emma clung to her, heart pounding with dread. They emerged from the trees onto a rise overlooking the encampment. The sight below made Emma's blood run cold. Tippis burned. Bodies lay motionless in the snow, and mounted men rode through the camp, firing at anything that moved. Even from a distance, Emma recognized Samuel Blackwood's distinctive black hat and coat as he directed the assault from horseback. No, Singing Bird moaned, a sound of pure anguish. My people! Emma felt sick with guilt. This is because of me, because they sheltered me. No time for blame, Singing Bird said, her voice hardening as she pulled a small knife from her belt and handed it to Emma. You ride to Broken Oak Crossing, trading post there. Ask for Sheriff Donovan. Tell him what you saw, both massacres. I go help my people. I can't leave you, Emma protested. This is my fight too. Singing Bird turned to meet her eyes. Your fight is truth, justice. You only witness. You must live to tell what happened. She squeezed Emma's hand. Go, now. Before Emma could argue further, a shout rose from below. One of Blackwood's men had spotted them on the ridge. Singing Bird slapped the horse's flank hard, sending it galloping away from the camp with Emma clinging to its back. The last glimpse Emma had was of the medicine woman running not away from danger, but toward it, toward her people who needed her. Emma rode hard, tears blinding her as guilt and grief threatened to overwhelm her. But beneath those emotions burned a new fire, rage, determination, and a thirst for justice that would not be denied. The truth was her weapon now, the memories were her ammunition, and somewhere perhaps Nathan still lived, searching for answers just as she had been. Emma Wilson was no longer lost, no longer a victim. She had been reborn in the hands of a Sioux medicine woman, and now she rode to ensure that both their peoples would know exactly what had happened at Black Eagle Valley, and who was truly responsible for the blood that stained the snow. The thundering hoofbeats of the horse beneath her matched Emma's racing heartbeat as she fled from the burning Lakota camp. The image of Singing Bird running toward danger rather than away from it was branded into her mind, another memory she would never forget. The knife the medicine woman had pressed into her hand felt impossibly small compared to the rifles wielded by Blackwood's men. But Emma clutched it tightly, her only physical connection to the woman who had saved her life twice over. Snow-laden, branches whipped past her face as she urged the paint mare deeper into the forest, away from the main trails. She had no saddle, only a crude blanket between her and the horse's back, and her thighs ached with the effort of staying mounted. The mare seemed to sense the urgency of their flight, responding to Emma's desperate guidance without hesitation, leaping over fallen logs and navigating the treacherous terrain with sure-footed determination. Behind her, shouts faded into the distance. Emma risked a glance over her shoulder. No immediate pursuit. Perhaps they had deemed one fleeing woman less important than completing their assault on the camp. The thought brought no relief, only a deepening ache of guilt and horror at what was happening to the people who had sheltered her. Broken Oak Crossing. That was where Singing Bird had told her to go. Ask for Sheriff Donovan. Tell the truth about both massacres. The instructions were simple, but the implications vast. Emma's recovered memories had revealed the true villains, but would anyone believe a traumatized woman over a wealthy land developer like Samuel Blackwood? The forest began to thin as Emma rode westward, giving way to rolling hills dusted with snow. In the distance, a thin plume of smoke rose against the pale sky, not the ominous black smoke of destruction, but the steady gray of hearth fires. Civilization, or some frontier approximation of it. Emma slowed the exhausted horse to a walk, her own breath coming in ragged gasps as the adrenaline of her escape began to fade. Pain returned in waves, her still-healing head wound throbbing, muscles screaming from the hard ride, fingers stiff with cold inside her buckskin mittens. But physical discomfort was nothing compared to the turmoil in her mind. Nathan might be alive. The thought surfaced again and again, a fragile bubble of hope in a sea of despair. If he had returned to the wagon train after scouting ahead, if he had escaped Blackwood's men, if he was still searching for her. So many ifs. And even if he lived, where would he go? What would he do, believing her dead along with all their companions? The settlement of Broken Oak Crossing appeared gradually through the afternoon haze, a clutch of rough-hewn buildings huddled around a central thoroughfare. Smoke rose from stone chimneys, and hitching posts stood occupied by horses and the occasional mule. It was larger than Emma had expected, not quite a proper town, but more substantial than a simple trading post. As she approached, Emma became acutely aware of her appearance. She wore Lakota clothing, a buckskin dress with intricate beadwork, leggings, and fur-lined moccasins. Her hair hung in two long braids, woven through with threads in the Lakota, styled by Morningstar's careful hands. She looked, she realized, more Indian than white. In a territory gripped by tension between settlers and native tribes, this could prove dangerous. Too late to turn back now. Emma straightened her spine as she guided the mare into the settlement. Faces turned toward her immediately, conversations halting mid-sentence as she rode slowly down the main street. Men emerged from the saloon. Women paused in their tasks, all staring with expressions ranging from curiosity to open hostility. "That's Singing Bird's horse," someone muttered, just loud enough for Emma to hear. "But that ain't no Indian," another voice replied. Emma kept her gaze forward, scanning the crude wooden signs hanging outside the buildings: general store, barber, saloon, post office. At the far end of the street stood a small building with a simple sign reading Sheriff and a hitching post. Outside, relief washed through her, quickly tempered by caution. Singing Bird had spoken of Sheriff Donovan as someone who might help, but Emma had learned the hard way that appearances could be deceiving. Samuel Blackwood had seemed respectable too, before he'd ordered the slaughter of 7 families for a gold map. She dismounted stiffly outside the sheriff's office, her legs nearly buckling as they took her weight. The mare's sides heaved with exhaustion, foam flecking its muzzle. Emma patted its neck in silent gratitude before tying the reins to the hitching post. Her hand went to the locket around her neck, a reflexive gesture that had become habitual since her awakening in Singing Bird's teepee. The weight of it against her skin was reassuring, a talisman of her recovered identity. Taking a deep breath, Emma pushed open the door to the sheriff's office. The interior was warm, a welcome contrast to the biting cold outside. A pot-bellied stove radiated heat from one corner beside a desk cluttered with papers and a half-eaten meal. Wanted posters adorned the walls, flanking a gun rack that held several rifles and a shotgun. 3 cells lined the back wall, all empty except for the middle one, which contained a snoring man who reeked of whiskey even from a distance. Behind the desk sat a man in his 50s, broad-shouldered but going soft around the middle, with graying hair and a neatly trimmed beard. He looked up from his paperwork as Emma entered, surprise registering in his weathered face. "Can I help you, ma'am?" he asked, setting down his pencil. "Are you Sheriff Donovan?" Emma's voice cracked from disuse and tension. "I am." He studied her with increasing curiosity, taking in her Lakota clothing and the healing wound on her temple. "And you are?" "My name is Emma Wilson." She stepped forward, urgency overriding caution. "I need your help. Samuel Blackwood is attacking a Lakota winter camp right now, killing innocent people. Before that, he massacred a wagon train near Black Eagle Valley, my wagon train. Everyone thinks the Lakota were responsible, but it was Blackwood. I'm the only survivor." Sheriff Donovan's expression shifted from curiosity to wariness. He stood slowly, one hand moving to rest near the holstered revolver at his hip. "That's quite a story, Mrs. Wilson. Maybe you should sit down and start from the beginning." Emma remained standing, frustration mounting. "There's no time. People are dying as we speak. The Lakota had nothing to do with the Wagon massacre. Blackwood attacked us for a map to a gold deposit my husband discovered. Then he attacked the Lakota camp because they sheltered me. Your husband being Nathan Wilson." Emma's voice in court on the name. "He wasn't with the Wagons when they were attacked. He might still be alive." Sheriff Donovan gestured to a chair across from his desk. "Sit, Mrs. Wilson, please. You look about ready to collapse, and I can't help anyone if I don't understand what's happening." Reluctantly, Emma sank into the offered chair, her body betraying her with a wave of exhaustion that threatened to overwhelm her resolve. The sheriff poured coffee from a pot on the stove and pushed the mug across the desk to her. The bitter aroma triggered another flash of memory. Mornings in her own kitchen, Nathan teasing her about the strength of her coffee as she packed provisions for their journey west. "Now," Donovan said, reclaiming his seat, "start from the beginning. How did you end up in Lakota clothing, riding a Lakota horse, with a tale about 2 massacres and gold?" Emma wrapped her cold fingers around the warm mug and began to speak. She told him everything, from what she now remembered of the wagon train attack to awakening without her memory in Singing Bird's care. She described the healing ceremony at Medicine Bluff that had restored her memories, and the horrifying sight of Blackwood's men burning the Lakota camp as she and Singing Bird returned. Sheriff Donovan listened without interruption, his expression giving nothing away. When Emma finished, silence filled the small office, broken only by the soft crackling of the stove and the occasional snore from the drunk in the cell. "That's quite a tale," Donovan said finally, leaning back in his chair, "and ordinarily I'd have a hard time believing it. But there's something you should see." He opened a drawer in his desk and withdrew a folded paper, sliding it across to Emma. "This came in 2 days ago from Fort Laramie." Emma unfolded the paper with trembling fingers. It was a wanted poster, but not for a criminal. It showed a crude sketch of a woman with the name Emma Wilson printed beneath. The text described her as missing, presumed dead, following a savage attack on a wagon train by hostile Indians. At the bottom was the name of the man offering a reward for information, Nathan Wilson. "He's alive," Emma whispered, tears blurring her vision as she traced the printed letters of her husband's name. "Nathan's alive. Appears so. Donovan confirmed, "and looking for you, dead or alive. Now about Blackwood." He stroked his beard thoughtfully. "I've had my suspicions about that man for some time. Too eager to blame the Lakota for every missing shipment or dead settler. Too eager to rile up the locals against Chief Grey Wolf's people, who've kept to the peace treaties better than most." Hope kindled in Emma's chest. "Then you believe me? Let's say I'm inclined to investigate further." Donovan stood, moving to the gun rack and selecting a rifle. "But first things first. If there's an attack on the Lakota camp happening right now, that takes priority. Blackwood doesn't have any authority to lead an armed assault on anyone, Indian or otherwise." Relief washed through Emma, followed quickly by renewed urgency. "We need to hurry. Singing Bird stayed behind to help her people. She's the one who saved me, who healed me. I can't let her die because of me." Donovan nodded, checking the rifles chamber before slinging it over his shoulder. "I'll gather a few men I trust. You stay here where it's safe." "No." Emma stood, swaying slightly but determined. "I'm going with you. I'm the witness. Without me, it's just your word against Blackwood's, and he has money and influence." The sheriff studied her for a long moment, measuring her resolve. "Can you ride?" "Yes." "Shoot?" Emma hesitated. I did during the Wagon attack. I hit one of Blackwood's men." A ghost of a smile crossed Donovan's face. "Then I reckon you can do it again if needed." He reached back into the desk drawer and pulled out a revolver, offering it to her grip first. "You know how to use this?" Emma accepted the weapon, its weight unfamiliar, but not entirely foreign to her hands. Another memory surfaced. Nathan, teaching her to shoot with a similar revolver, his arms around her as he guided her aim, his voice gentle in her ear. "Yes," she said softly. "I can use it." "Good. Let's get your horse fed and watered, and I'll round up some deputies." Donovan moved toward the door, then paused, fixing Emma with a serious gaze. "Mrs. Wilson, I should warn you. If what you say is true about the Lakota camp, we may already be too late for some of them." Emma nodded, the grim reality settling in her heart like a stone. "I know, but we have to try." As Donovan stepped outside, Emma remained for a moment. In the quiet office, the wanted poster still clutched in her hand. Nathan was looking for her. He hadn't given up hope. She wouldn't either, not for him, and not for the people who had restored her to herself when she was lost in more ways than one. Outside, Broken Oak Crossing had erupted into activity. Sheriff Donovan moved with purpose down the main street, calling out names, gathering a group of grim-faced men who checked weapons and mounted horses with practiced efficiency. Word of trouble spread quickly in frontier settlements, where survival often depended on community response to threats. Emma led Singing Bird's paint mare to the water trough, allowing the exhausted animal to drink, while Donovan's deputy provided grain. The mare's sides still heaved from the hard ride, but there was no choice but to ask more of the loyal creature. "That's a Lakota horse," a voice observed behind her. Emma turned to find a woman watching her, arms crossed over a flour-dusted apron. Unlike the openly hostile stares Emma had received upon entering town, this woman's expression held curiosity, mingled with concern. "Yes," Emma acknowledged, "she belongs to Singing Bird, the medicine woman who saved my life." The woman's eyebrows rose. "You're the one they're all talking about, the survivor from the Wagon Massacre." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Is it true what you told the sheriff, that it wasn't Indians who attacked your people?" "It's true," Emma confirmed, surprised by the woman's willingness to consider this possibility. "Samuel Blackwood ordered the attack to steal a gold map." The woman's lips thinned. "That doesn't surprise me as much as it should. Blackwood's had his eye on expanding his holdings for years. My husband says he's not particular about how he acquires land." She glanced toward the gathering posse, then back to Emma. "I'm Martha Collier. My husband Thomas runs the general store. If there's anything you need." Emma felt unexpected tears prick her eyes at this small kindness. "Thank you. I appreciate that." Martha nodded, then hesitated. "Be careful out there. Blackwood has friends in high places, even if he is a snake." Before Emma could respond, Sheriff Donovan approached, leading a fresh horse. "Your mare's done. In Mrs. Wilson, you'll ride Thunder here. He's steady and sure-footed in rough country." Emma patted the paint mare's neck in silent gratitude for carrying her to safety, then accepted the reins of the tall bay gelding. Martha stepped forward, offering a bundle wrapped in cloth. "Food for the journey," she explained, "and an extra blanket. Temperatures drop fast this time of year." "Thank you," Emma said, touched by the unexpected support. Minutes later, she rode beside Sheriff Donovan at the head of a 7-man posse, leaving Broken Oak Crossing behind as they headed east toward the Lakota winter camp. The men around her were a mix of ages and backgrounds, a silver-haired trapper with a face like tanned leather, twin brothers who operated the livery stable, barely out of their teens but skilled, with horses and rifles, a bearded blacksmith whose massive arms could probably bend iron bars, and 2 ranchers from nearby homesteads, taciturn but determined. "These men have no quarrel with the Lakota," Donovan explained as they rode. "Grey Wolf's people have traded, fairly kept to their territories, even helped search for lost children more than once. Not everyone buys Blackwood's tale that they're bloodthirsty savages just waiting for a chance to attack." The acknowledgement of the Lakota's humanity was heartening, though Emma wondered if these men would have been as willing to ride to their defense without a white woman's testimony. Such thoughts were a luxury she couldn't afford now. What mattered was reaching the camp in time to save whoever might still be alive. Singing Bird, Morning Star, Chief Grey Wolf, and all the others who had become more than strangers to her. In the weeks of her healing, they rode hard through the afternoon, following Emma's directions as best she could reconstruct them. The landscape became increasingly familiar, that distinctive rock formation, the bend in the creek, the lightning-blasted pine that stood like a sentinel on a ridge. With each recognized landmark, Emma's anxiety grew. What would they find when they reached the camp? Who would still be alive? The sun was lowering toward the western horizon when Sheriff Donovan raised his fist, signaling a halt. They had reached a rise overlooking the valley where the Lakota winter camp had been established. Even before she consciously registered what she was seeing, Emma felt sick dread clutch at her stomach. The ordered circle of teepees was gone, replaced by charred remains and collapsed structures. Bodies lay scattered across the snow, dark shapes motionless against the white. Smoke still rose from smoldering ruins, but there were no flames now, no movement, no signs of life. "My God," Donovan murmured, removing his hat. The men around them shifted uncomfortably, expressions grim as they surveyed the devastation. Emma urged her horse forward, unable to accept what her eyes were telling her. This couldn't be all that remained of the vibrant community that had taken her in, healed her, protected her. There had to be survivors. There had to be. "Careful, Mrs. Wilson," Donovan called, spurring his own mount to follow her down the slope. Whoever did this might still be around. But Emma couldn't wait. Couldn't proceed with caution when every moment might mean the difference between life and death for someone below. She rode into the camp at a gallop, leaping from the horse before it had fully stopped beside the remains of what she recognized as Singing Bird's teepee. "Singing Bird," she called, her voice breaking with desperation. "Morning Star?" No answer came. Emma moved through the camp, checking bodies, looking for faces she recognized, both dreading and needing to know who had perished. Many of the dead were warriors, cut down defending their people. She found the body of Running Fox, the young man who had brought news of the settlers' anger. Chief Grey Wolf lay nearby, still clutching his war club, his proud face frozen in a final expression of defiance. Emma knelt beside him, overwhelmed with grief and guilt. If she had never been brought to this camp, if Singing Bird had left her, to die in the snow, as any sensible person might have done. Mrs. Wilson, Sheriff Donovan's voice was gentle behind her. There's nothing you could have done to prevent this. Blackwood would have found another excuse if not you. You don't know that, Emma whispered, rising slowly to her feet. How many escaped? There should have been at least 30 people in this camp, maybe more. I've only found a dozen bodies. Donovan nodded, understanding her desperate hope. My men are searching the perimeter. If some got away, they'll have left tracks. As if summoned by his words, the young livery stable owner rode up, his expression animated. Sheriff, we found tracks heading north toward the caves in Ghost Pine Forest. Looks like a group of about 15 or 20 people moving fast, but trying to hide their trail. Hope surged through Emma. The caves would be a good place to hide, defensible with multiple escape routes. Singing Bird told me stories about her people using them during past conflicts. Then that's where we'll head, Donovan decided. Before we go, we should gather the dead. Give them proper respect. Emma nodded, grateful for his understanding. It was more than many white lawmen would have offered for slain Indians. Together with Donovan's men, she helped collect the bodies, laying them with dignity in the center of the camp where funeral rites would have been conducted in times of peace. She murmured what fragments of Lakota prayers she had learned from Singing Bird, hoping it was better than nothing at all. As the last body was placed, the silver-haired trapper approached, holding something in his weathered hands. Found this by the creek, he said, offering it to Emma. Thought it might be important. Emma's breath caught as she recognized Singing Bird's medicine pouch, the small leather bag the older woman had worn constantly, containing sacred herbs and objects of spiritual significance. It was stained with blood, its beadwork partially torn away. Singing Bird would never willingly part with this, Emma said, clutching the pouch to her chest. Never. Blood doesn't necessarily mean she's dead, Donovan said quietly. Could be she lost it in a struggle, wounded but still fighting. Emma nodded, tucking the medicine pouch into her own clothing. When she found Singing Bird, she would return it. The alternative was unthinkable. They mounted up as the last light faded from the sky, following the tracks northward by torchlight. The trail was difficult to discern. Whoever had led the escaping Lakota had been skilled at concealment, breaking their group into smaller parties that separated and rejoined, crossing rocky ground and streams to obscure their passage. Clever, the old trapper commented, leaning from his saddle to examine partial footprints in the snow. These folks know what they're doing. Blackwood's men would have a devil of a time following this trail, especially in the dark. Let's hope that bought them enough time to reach safety, Donovan said, straightening in his saddle and gesturing for the group to continue. They rode through the night, stopping only when necessary to rest the horses or to puzzle out the next direction of the trail. Emma's body ached with fatigue, her healing injuries protesting the renewed strain, but she refused to slow their pace. Every hour might mean life or death for the survivors. Dawn was breaking when they reached the edge of Ghost Pine Forest, a dense stand of ancient trees with pale, almost white bark that gave the area its name. Mist hung between the trunks, creating an ethereal, haunting atmosphere that had inspired countless frontier tales of spirits and hauntings. The caves lay somewhere within this labyrinthine woodland, but finding them without a guide would be nearly impossible. As they hesitated at the forest's edge, debating how to proceed, a sound reached them. Soft, almost imperceptible. A bird call, but not quite natural. Emma recognized it immediately from her time with the Lakota. That's a signal, she said, turning toward the source. Someone's watching us. Sheriff Donovan motioned for his men to lower their weapons. We come as friends, he called into the misty forest. In peace. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then a figure emerged from between two ghost pines, moving with deliberate slowness. A young Lakota warrior, barely more than a boy, held a bow half drawn, his face smeared with ash and blood. His eyes widened when he saw Emma. "Spirit woman," he said in halting English, using the name Summon the tribe had given her after her miraculous recovery. "You live?" "Yes," Emma replied in the Lakota words Singing Bird had taught her, hoping she was pronouncing them correctly. "I live. We come to help." The young warrior's stance relaxed slightly, though he kept his bow ready. "Many dead," said grimly. "Blackwood men attack without warning. Chief Grey Wolf fight to give others time to escape." "We saw," Emma said, her throat tight with grief. "We honored your dead as best we could. Are there survivors in the caves? Is Singing Bird alive?" The warrior hesitated, clearly weighing how much to trust these armed white men. Finally, he nodded. "Some live. The medicine woman lives, but—" He touched his side, indicating an injury. "Bad wound. She asked for you before she sleep." Emma's heart leapt with hope and fear in equal measure. Singing Bird was alive, but wounded, perhaps gravely. "Take me to her, please." The warrior looked to Sheriff Donovan and his men with lingering suspicion. Donovan removed his hat in a gesture of respect. "I'm Sheriff Caleb Donovan from Broken Oak Crossing. These men are my deputies. We've come to help and to see justice done for what happened to your people." After a tense moment, the young man nodded. "Follow. Single line. Step where I step." He turned and melted back into the mist, leaving them to fall in behind him. The forest closed around them like a living entity, branches reaching down to pluck at their clothing, roots rising from the earth to trip unwary feet. Their guide moved with the assurance of one who knew these woods intimately, occasionally making small signals that Emma interpreted as warnings about particularly treacherous footing or low-hanging obstacles. The journey seemed to take hours, though in reality it couldn't have been more than 40 minutes. The terrain grew increasingly steep and rocky until finally their guide led them around a massive boulder to reveal the dark mouth of a cave, partially hidden by trailing vines and scrub brush. Two more warriors stood guard at the entrance, bows drawn, as the group approached. A rapid exchange in Lakota followed, too quick and complex for Emma to follow with her limited vocabulary. Whatever was said, it appeared to satisfy the guards, who lowered their weapons and stepped aside. "You come," their guide said to Emma. "Sheriff man too. Others wait here." Donovan instructed his men to remain outside, then followed Emma into the cave. The interior was surprisingly warm after the biting cold of the forest, and dimly lit by small fires spaced at intervals along the cavern walls. The cave extended deep into the hillside, with smaller chambers branching off from the main passage. Survivors huddled in these chambers, women cradling children, elderly people wrapped in whatever blankets had been salvaged from the camp, wounded warriors being tended by those still able to move about. Emma recognized many faces, though there were far fewer than there should have been. Perhaps 20 people in total had escaped the massacre. Their guide led them toward the back of the main cavern, where a smaller chamber had been curtained off with a salvaged teepee cover. "Medicine woman here," he said, gesturing for them to enter. Emma pushed aside the makeshift curtain with trembling hands. The small chamber beyond was warmed by a tiny fire, its smoke finding some natural chimney in the cave ceiling to escape without suffocating the occupants. Morningstar knelt beside a pallet of furs, her young face drawn with exhaustion and grief as she tended to the figure lying motionless on the makeshift bed. Singing Bird lay pale and still, her breathing shallow, a blood-soaked bandage wrapped around her midsection. Her silver-streaked hair had come loose from its usual braids, spreading across the furs like a fan. She looked smaller somehow, more vulnerable than Emma had ever seen her. "Singing bird," Emma whispered, dropping to her knees beside the injured woman. Morning Star looked up, relief washing over her tear-stained face. "Emma, you safe? We fear for you." "I'm safe," Emma confirmed, reaching out to take Singing Bird's limp hand in her own. "I reached Broken Oak Crossing and found Sheriff Donovan, just as your mother said to do. We came as quickly as we could." Morning Star's gaze shifted to the sheriff, who stood respectfully at the chamber entrance, hat in hands. Her expression remained wary, though not outright hostile. "You help us now, after white men kill our people?" "Not all white men are the same, just as not all Indians are the same," Donovan said gravely. "What Blackwood did was criminal. Murder. I intend to see him answer for it." Morningstar didn't look entirely convinced, but she returned her attention to her mother, adjusting the bandage with gentle hands. "Arrow wound, deep. I remove arrow, stop bleeding, but..." She shook her head, frustration evident. "Need medicines from camp. All burned." Emma suddenly remembered the pouch she carried. "The trapper found this by the creek," she said, withdrawing Singing Bird's medicine bag. "Maybe there's something in here that can help." Morningstar's eyes widened. She accepted the pouch reverently, opening it with careful fingers to examine the contents. "Some herbs survive, maybe enough." She looked up at Emma with renewed hope. "You help, you learn some healing from Mother." "I'll do whatever I can," Emma promised, though her knowledge of Lakota medicine was rudimentary at best. As they spoke, Singing Bird stirred, her eyelids fluttering. "Water," she rasped, her voice barely audible. Morning Star quickly held a skin of water to her mother's lips, allowing her to take a few small sips. Singing Bird's eyes opened fully, focusing first on her daughter, then shifting to Emma with an expression of relief. "You reached the crossing," she murmured. "Good." "Yes," Emma said, squeezing the older woman's hand gently. "Sheriff Donovan came with men to help. We're going to make sure Blackwood pays for what he's done." Singing Bird's gaze moved to Donovan, assessing him with the same keen intelligence that had impressed Emma from their first meeting. "You believe her? About Wagon Massacre?" "I do," Donovan confirmed, stepping closer and crouching to be at eye level with the injured woman. "And I believe what happened here was murder, plain and simple. You have my word I'll do everything in my power to bring Blackwood to justice." A ghost of a smile touched Singing Bird's lips. "Good man, rare thing." Her eyes returned to Emma, suddenly urgent. "The others, from camp?" Emma couldn't bring herself to deliver the full toll of death, not while Singing Bird was so weak. "Many escaped. They're here in the caves. Chief Grey Wolf, he died protecting the retreat." Singing Bird closed her eyes briefly, a tear escaping to track down her weathered cheek. "He die as he live, with honor." She drew a labored breath, wincing at the pain it caused. "Emma, your husband searches for you." "I know," Emma said, surprised. "Sheriff Donovan showed me a wanted poster. How did you know?" "Man come to camp 3 days before attack. Ask about Wagon people. Show drawing of you." Singing Bird's voice grew fainter, the effort of speaking clearly taxing her limited strength. "I not tell him you with us. Not trust strange white man. But he leave message. Say if anyone see Emma Wilson, tell her Nathan waits at Fort Laramie." Emma's heart leapt. Nathan was at our camp? So close? The thought that her husband had been near enough to touch, yet still separated from her by Singing Bird's caution, brought a complex rush of emotions, frustration, understanding, and renewed hope. "Not tell you then, you still healing. Mind, still fragile." Singing Bird's grip on Emma's hand tightened slightly. "Tell you now, go to him, but first..." Her eyes flashed with determination despite her weakened state. "First, we make Blackwood pay for blood spilled." Dawn broke over Ghost Pine Forest in a wash of pale gold, filtering through the white trunks and casting long shadows across the Cave entrance. Emma sat beside the small fire in Singing Bird's chamber, grinding herbs from the salvaged medicine pouch according to Morning Star's instructions. Her hands moved mechanically, her mind torn between the immediate crisis and the revelation that Nathan was waiting for her at Fort Laramie. Her husband was alive. The thought repeated itself like a prayer, a counterpoint to the grim reality surrounding her. Nathan was alive, but Singing Bird might die. Nathan was searching for her, but dozens of Lakota lay dead because of Blackwood's hatred. Hope and horror wove together into a tapestry Emma could barely comprehend. Morning Star entered the chamber, carrying fresh water in a skin made from a deer's bladder. The young woman's face was drawn with exhaustion, dark circles beneath her, eyes evidence of a sleepless night, tending to her mother and the other wounded survivors. "How is she?" Emma asked softly, nodding towards Singing Bird's still form. "Fever comes," Morning Star replied, kneeling to check the bandages around her mother's midsection. "Not good sign." Emma's heart sank. She had seen enough frontier illness to know the danger of wound fever. Without proper medicine, real medicine, not just herbs and poultices, Singing Bird's chances were slim. Sheriff Donovan appeared at the chamber entrance, his expression grave. "Mrs. Wilson, could I have a word?" Emma nodded, rising stiffly after a night spent on the stone floor. Her muscles protested, reminding her of her own still-healing injuries. She followed Donovan a short distance away, where they could speak, without disturbing Singing Bird. "We've got a problem," the sheriff said, keeping his voice low. "My men spotted riders about 2 miles south of here. 8, maybe 10 of them, armed and moving with purpose. Could be Blackwood's men, searching for survivors." Fresh fear clutched at Emma's heart. Could they find the caves? Hard to say. Your young guide did a fine job covering the trail, but a determined tracker might spot something we missed. Either way, we need to decide what to do. These caves are defensible, but if they find us, we're trapped. Emma glanced back towards Singing Bird's chamber. "We can't move the wounded. Not Singing Bird, not the others. They'd never survive the journey." Donovan nodded, having clearly reached the same conclusion. "Then, we need to make sure those riders never find this place. I'm going to take 4 of my men and head out to intercept them, lead them away from here if we can. And if you can't," the sheriff's hand moved to the revolver at his hip, his meaning clear. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that. I'd rather arrest Blackwood than shoot his men, but I won't hesitate if innocent lives are at stake." "I'm coming." "With you," Emma said firmly. Donovan shook his head. "Too dangerous, Mrs. Wilson. Besides, you're needed here with the wounded." "Morning Star knows more about Lakota medicine than I ever will," Emma countered. "And I'm the only one who can identify Blackwood and his men with certainty. I saw their faces during the Wagon Massacre when they thought no witnesses remained. I can prove they were the ones responsible, not the Lakota." The sheriff studied her face, measuring her resolve. "Your husband is waiting for you at Fort Laramie. You've already risked your life once. Why risk it again?" Emma thought of Singing Bird, running toward danger rather than away from it. Of Chief Grey Wolf standing his ground to give others time to escape. Of Morning Star's unwavering care for her wounded people. "Because it's the right thing to do," she said simply. Nathan would understand that. After a moment, Donovan nodded. "Very well, but you stay behind me. Follow orders, and if things go bad, you ride hard for Fort Laramie and don't look back. Understood?" "Understood." They returned to Singing Bird's chamber, where Emma knelt once more beside the medicine woman. Singing Bird's skin burned with fever, her breathing shallow and rapid. Emma took her hand, squeezing gently. "I have to go," she said softly, unsure if Singing Bird could hear her. "Blackwood's men are searching for survivors. We're going to lead them away from the caves. I'll be back soon, I promise." To her surprise, Singing Bird's eyes fluttered open, feverishly bright but lucid. "Be careful," she whispered. "Blackwood, dangerous man." I know. Emma reached into her pocket and withdrew the locket containing Nathan's portrait. She pressed it into Singing Bird's palm, closing the older woman's fingers around it. Keep this safe for me, a promise that I'll return. Morningstar watched the exchange with solemn eyes. We pray to spirits for your protection, she said, offering Emma a small leather pouch on a cord. Medicine for strength. Emma slipped the cord around her neck, touched by the gesture. Thank you. Take care of your mother. Outside the cave, Donovan had assembled his chosen men, the silver-haired trapper, one of the livery stable twins, and two of the ranchers. All looked determined, checking weapons and adjusting saddles in preparation for the confrontation ahead. A young Lakota warrior approached, the same one who had guided them to the caves. I come too, he stated, not a request, but a declaration. No forest, nowhere to lead bad men away from caves. Donovan exchanged glances with Emma, who nodded. What's your name? The sheriff asked. Swift Fox, the young man replied. Brother of Running Fox, who died protecting camp. Welcome, Swift Fox, Donovan said with a respectful nod. We'll be glad of your guidance. They mounted quickly, Emma once again astride the bay gelding Donovan had provided. Swift Fox led them through the ghostly forest by paths invisible to untrained eyes, moving parallel to their own trail from the previous night but never crossing it. The mist had burned away with the rising sun, but the forest remained eerily quiet, as if the very trees held their breath in anticipation of conflict. After nearly an hour of careful travel, Swift Fox raised his hand for silence. He dismounted in a fluid motion, pressing his ear to the ground. His expression grew tense as he rose. Horses coming, he reported. Many from south, moving fast. Donovan nodded grimly. Then we'll give them something to chase. Swift Fox, is there open ground nearby where we could be spotted? The young warrior thought for a moment, then nodded. Creek crossing, half-mile west. Clear view from South Ridge. Perfect. We'll show ourselves just enough to draw them away from the caves, then use your forest knowledge to lose them, or if necessary, choose better ground for a confrontation. Swift Fox grinned, a fierce expression that reminded Emma of his fallen brother. Good plan. Follow. They rode west at a swift trot, no longer concerned with concealing their trail. If anything, obvious tracks would serve their purpose better, drawing Blackwood's men away from the hidden caves. The forest thinned gradually, giving way to a clearing where a shallow creek cut through rocky terrain. There, Swift Fox said, pointing to a rise beyond the creek. Ridge, where they will see us if they follow our tracks. Donovan surveyed the area with a tactician's eye. Good. We'll cross the creek, make sure they spot us, then head north along that game trail. It should lead them away from the caves while giving us plenty of cover. They urged their horses across the creek, water splashing up around the animals' fetlocks. As they reached the far bank, a shout echoed from the south. Emma turned to see riders cresting a distant hill, at least 8 men on horseback, there, outlines distinct against the morning sky. They've spotted us, the silver-haired trapper murmured, one hand moving to his rifle. Good, Donovan replied. Now they'll follow us instead of tracking back to the caves. Let's move. They spurred their mounts northward, following the game trail Swift Fox had indicated. Emma glanced back once to confirm their pursuers had changed. Course to follow, then focused on the path ahead. The terrain grew increasingly rugged, the trail winding between rock formations and stands of pine. Swift Fox led them unerringly, occasionally calling out warnings about treacherous footing or low-hanging branches. Despite the urgency of their flight, Emma found herself impressed by the young warrior's knowledge of the land. This was his home. In a way, it would never be for the settlers who sought to claim it. After several miles, the trail widened into a small clearing surrounded by large boulders. Swift Fox reined in his horse, turning to Donovan. Good place for trap, he said, gesturing to the rocks. We hide. They come. No escape for them. The sheriff considered the terrain, then nodded. A sound strategy. We'll take positions among these rocks. Mrs. Wilson, you'll stay with me behind that boulder at the far end. Everyone else, find cover and prepare yourselves. We try to take them alive if possible, but if they fire first, defend yourselves. They dismounted, leading their horses behind the rock formation and securing them out of sight. Then each person found a position with a clear view of the trail entrance, while remaining hidden from approaching riders. Emma crouched beside Donovan behind a massive boulder, the rough stone cool against her back. The sheriff checked his rifle one final time, his weathered face calm but alert. "You sure you're ready for this, Mrs. Wilson?" he asked quietly. "It's not too late to stay back with the horses." Emma thought of the bodies scattered across the snow at the Lakota camp, of Singing Bird fighting for her life in the caves, of the families slaughtered in the Wagon massacre. Her hand moved to the revolver tucked into her belt. "I'm ready," she said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. They didn't have long to wait. Within minutes, the sound of approaching horses reached them. Hoofbeats, the jingle of tack, men's voices raised in confident conversation. "Tracks. Lead right through here," one voice said. "Can't be far ahead now." "Blackwood wants the woman alive," another replied. "The Indians he doesn't care about, but he said Wilson's wife has something that belongs to him." Emma's breath caught. The map. Blackwood still believed she had the gold map, not realizing his men had already taken it from her unconscious body after the Wagon massacre. If he discovered it was missing, would he believe her, or would he assume she'd hidden it somewhere? The riders entered the clearing in single file, the narrow trail forcing them to bunch together between the rock formations. Emma counted 8 men, all armed with rifles. In the lead was a man she recognized from the Wagon attack, William Hayes, Blackwood's enforcer, a brutish man with a badly scarred face and dead eyes. Sheriff Donovan waited until all 8 riders were fully in the clearing before standing, rifle raised. "That's far enough," he called. "Drop your weapons and state your business in this territory." The reaction was immediate. Horses reared in surprise, riders cursed and reached for weapons. Hayes recovered first, his scarred face contorting with rage as he spotted Donovan's badge glinting in the sunlight. "We're hunting renegade Indians, Sheriff," he said, his tone insolent. "The savages that massacred the Wilson wagon train and have been raiding settlements. Just doing our civic duty." "Strange coincidence," Donovan replied coolly. "I've been investigating those very same incidents, and I have a witness who tells a very different story about who's responsible for the bloodshed." Hayes's eyes narrowed, scanning the rocks. His gaze locked on Emma as she stood beside Donovan, and a slow, ugly smile spread across his face. "Well, well, Mrs. Wilson, is it? Your husband's been looking everywhere for you. Samuel Blackwood, too. Both real concerned about your welfare." "I bet they are," Emma replied, keeping her voice steady despite the fear churning in her stomach. "Especially since I can identify every one of you who attacked our wagon train and murdered those families in cold blood." Hayes's smile vanished. One hand moved toward his holstered pistol, but Donovan's voice cut through the tension. "I wouldn't. My men have rifles trained on each of you from these rocks. Drop your weapons. You're under arrest for the murder of American citizens and members of the Lakota tribe." For a moment, it seemed Hayes might comply. Then his eyes flickered to one of his men, a subtle signal, and everything happened at once. Gunfire erupted. From all sides, Emma ducked as bullets whined off the boulder beside her head. Donovan fired his rifle with calm precision, dropping one of Hayes's men from his saddle. The clearing became chaos, horses screaming, men shouting, the deafening crack of rifles and revolvers. Through the smoke and confusion, Emma saw Hayes wheel his horse around, spurring it toward the trail they'd entered by. Without thinking, she raised the revolver Donovan had given her and fired. The shot went wide, but it drew Hayes's attention. He turned in his saddle, his own pistol leveling at her. A blur of movement from the left, Swift Fox launching himself from the rocks onto Hayes's horse. The young warrior and the enforcer crashed to the ground in a tangle of limbs, rolling across the dirt as Hayes's panicked mount bolted into the trees. Emma moved without conscious thought, running towards the struggling men. Hayes had the advantage of size and strength, pinning Swift Fox beneath him, one hand around the young warrior's throat while the other fumbled for a knife at his belt. She fired again. This time, her aim was true. Hayes jerked as the bullet struck his shoulder, his grip on Swift Fox loosening enough for the warrior to break free. Swift Fox drove his knee into Hayes's stomach, reversing their positions in a lightning-quick move. His fist connected with Hayes's jaw once, twice, the enforcer's head snapping back with each impact. "Swift Fox," Emma called. "We need him alive." "To testify." The warrior hesitated, chest heaving with exertion and rage. For a moment, Emma thought he would ignore her, would beat Hayes to death in retribution for his brother's murder. Then, slowly, Swift Fox rose, dragging the dazed enforcer to his feet and shoving him roughly toward Emma. "He live," Swift Fox said, his voice tight with controlled fury. "For now." Around them, the gunfire had ceased. 3 of Hayes's men lay dead in the clearing. The others, including Hayes himself, had been disarmed and restrained with leather thongs. Donovan's posse had suffered as well. One of the ranchers clutched a bloodied arm, and the livery stable twin sported a graze across his cheek, but miraculously, none had been killed. "Good shooting, Mrs. Wilson," Donovan said, approaching with rifle still in hand, "though I'd prefer you'd stayed behind cover as instructed." Emma lowered the revolver, suddenly aware of how badly her hands were shaking. "Sorry, Sheriff. I didn't think. Lucky for Swift Fox, you didn't." Donovan turned his attention to Hayes, who glared at them with undisguised hatred. "William Hayes, I'm arresting you for murder and conspiracy to commit murder. You'll be taken to Fort Laramie to await trial, along with your employer, Samuel Blackwood." Hayes spat blood onto the dirt. "You've got nothing on Blackwood. He wasn't even there for either attack." "But you were," Emma said, stepping closer, "and I saw you take orders from him at our camp the night before the massacre. I heard him tell you to find the map. I can testify to all of it." Something flickered in Hayes's eyes, fear quickly masked by defiance. "Your word against his, a grief-stricken widow. Who do you think a judge will believe? Blackwood owns half the territory." "Maybe so," Donovan conceded, "but he doesn't own justice. And I suspect once word gets out that we're looking for evidence against him, others will come forward. Men like Blackwood make enemies as easily as they make money." The sheriff turned to his men. "Secure the prisoners. We'll head for Fort Laramie as soon as we've tended to the wounded and retrieved our people from the caves." Emma's heart leapt. Fort Laramie. Nathan. After all this time, after everything that had happened, she would finally be reunited with her husband. The thought should have brought pure joy, but instead it came mingled with apprehension. So much had changed. She had changed. Swift Fox approached, wiping blood from his split knuckles. "Bad men captured, now what?" "Now we go back for your people," Emma said, "and make sure Singing Bird and the others get the medical care they need at the fort." The young warrior nodded, though his expression remained skeptical. "White man fort. Not safe for Lakota." "It will be," Emma promised. "Sheriff Donovan will make sure of it, and so will I." The journey back to the caves took longer with prisoners in tow. Hayes and his surviving men were bound and mounted on their own horses, each led by one of Donovan's deputies. They traveled in sullen silence, occasionally exchanging glances that suggested they hadn't abandoned hope of escape. Emma rode beside Swift Fox, who remained vigilant despite the apparent victory. "You fought well," he said unexpectedly, glancing at her with newfound respect. For white woman, despite everything, Emma found herself smiling. And you fought well for a young man. Swift Fox's stern expression cracked, a brief flash of humor lighting his eyes. I am oldest son now, must protect what remains of my family. The simple declaration sobered Emma immediately. How many families had been destroyed or fractured by Blackwood's greed? How many children orphaned, parents left childless, siblings separated? Justice for the murderers would not restore what had been lost. When they reached the caves, they found the remaining Lakota survivors prepared for the worst. Warriors positioned at the entrance lowered their weapons in relief as they recognized Swift Fox and Emma, but their expressions grew tense again at the sight of the prisoners. Morning Star emerged from Singing Bird's chamber, her face tight with worry. Mother asks for you, she told Emma. Fever worse. Emma dismounted quickly, handing the reins to Donovan. I'll be as fast as I can. We need to move the wounded to Fort Laramie for proper medical care. Inside the dim chamber, Singing Bird lay motionless except for the rapid rise and fall of her chest. Her skin burned beneath Emma's touch, her eyes unfocused when they opened briefly at Emma's approach. We captured Hayes and his men, Emma told her, unsure how much the fever-stricken woman could understand. We're going to take everyone to Fort Laramie for medical treatment. You're going to be all right. Singing Bird's fingers weakly closed around Emma's wrist. Locket, she whispered. Emma saw her talisman still clutched in the medicine woman's other hand. Keep it for now, she said gently, until you're stronger. No. With visible effort, Singing Bird pressed the locket back into Emma's palm. Husband waits. Tears welled in Emma's eyes as she understood. Singing Bird was preparing for the possibility that she wouldn't survive the journey, or wouldn't survive at all. You're going to meet him yourself, she insisted. I'm not leaving you behind. Singing Bird's lips curved in a faint smile. Stubborn, like me. Her eyes drifted closed, strength exhausted by the brief exchange. Emma tucked the locket back into her pocket, renewed determination flooding her veins. She would not lose Singing Bird, not after everything they had survived together. Outside, Donovan had organized his men and the able-bodied Lakota to prepare travois for the wounded. Simple stretchers made from poles and blankets that could be dragged behind horses. It was a rough method of transport, but the only option for moving those too injured to ride. We should reach Fort Laramie by nightfall if we push hard, the sheriff told Emma. I've sent the trapper ahead to alert the fort surgeon to prepare for wounded, and the prisoners. Secured and watched. They'll face military justice at the fort until a circuit judge can be summoned. Swift Fox approached, his expression troubled. My people fear fort. Soldiers not always kind to Lakota. Donovan nodded, understanding the concern. I give you my word as sheriff that your people will be treated with respect and given medical care. The fort commander is a fair man. When he hears the full story, he'll ensure your safety. The warrior didn't look entirely convinced, but he nodded. For wounded, we go, but we watch. By midday, they were ready to depart. Singing Bird and 3 other severely wounded Lakota were secured on travois. The remaining survivors mounted double with Donovan's men, or on captured horses from Hayes's. A party. The prisoners rode in the center of the group, surrounded by armed guards. As they left the shelter of Ghost Pine Forest, Emma found herself scanning the horizon, half expecting to see more of Blackwood's men riding to their cohort's rescue. But the plains stretched empty in all directions, the winter landscape peaceful under the afternoon sun. Blackwood will know something's wrong when Hayes doesn't return, she said to Donovan as they rode side by side. Undoubtedly, the sheriff agreed, but he won't know exactly what happened or who's involved. With luck, we'll reach the fort before he can organize any response. And once we're there, Then we find your husband, get these people medical attention, and begin building our case against Blackwood. The army may send soldiers to arrest him once they hear our evidence." Emma nodded, though anxiety still churned in her stomach. Blackwood was wealthy and influential. Even with Hayes captured and her own testimony, would it be enough to bring him to justice? They rode steadily through the afternoon, stopping only briefly to check on the wounded and rest the horses. Singing Bird's condition remained grave, her breathing increasingly labored as the fever burned through her weakened body. Emma rode beside her travois whenever possible, offering water and adjusting blankets, feeling helpless against the infection that threatened the medicine woman's life. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, Fort Laramie appeared in the distance, a sprawling complex of wooden buildings surrounded by a high stockade wall. The American flag flew from a tall pole in the central parade ground, visible even from afar. Emma's heart quickened at the sight. Somewhere within those walls was Nathan, still searching for a wife he believed might be dead. After weeks of separation, after all the violence and loss, they would be reunited at last. But as they drew closer to the fort, her joy was tempered by concern for Singing Bird and the other Lakota. Would they receive the care they needed? Would the military believe their account of Blackwood's crimes? And even if justice was served, what future awaited the survivors of the massacre? Soldiers appeared on the walls as their approach was spotted. Then the main gates swung open. The trapper Donovan had sent ahead rode out to meet them, accompanied by a military officer on horseback. "Sheriff Donovan," the officer called as they drew near. "I'm Captain James Reynolds, second in command at Fort Laramie. Your man has informed us of the situation. We've prepared the infirmary for the wounded." Donovan touched his hat in acknowledgement. "Much obliged, Captain. We have prisoners as well, men involved in the massacre of both a wagon train and a Lakota winter camp." Reynolds's gaze moved over the bedraggled group, lingering on the bound prisoners and the injured Lakota on their travois. His expression revealed nothing of his thoughts. "The commander will want a full report, and I understand one of your party has been searched for quite diligently." His eyes found Emma, recognition dawning as he compared her face to the description. "That must have been circulated. Mrs. Wilson, I presume?" Emma nodded, suddenly finding it difficult to speak. Is my husband here?" "He is," Reynolds confirmed. "He's been organizing search parties for the past 3 weeks. Refused to believe you were dead without proof." A rare smile crossed the officer's stern face. "He's a determined man, your husband." "Yes," Emma whispered, tears threatening. "He is. Determination, the quality that had led Nathan to discover the gold deposit in the first place, the quality that had inspired their journey west with the wagon train, the quality that had kept him searching for her when others would have given up hope, the quality she had found in herself during these weeks of struggle and survival." As they passed through the fort gates into the bustling compound beyond, Emma felt as though she were crossing a threshold in more ways than one. Behind her lay a trail of blood and loss, of identity stripped away and painfully reconstructed. Ahead lay reunion and the promise of justice, but also the uncertainty of a future forever altered by what she had witnessed and endured. One thing was certain, she was not the same woman who had set out from independence with stars in her eyes and dreams of prosperity in the Western Territories. That Emma had died in the snow beside the wagon train, just as Blackwood had intended. In her place stood a survivor, tempered by suffering and strengthened by the bonds formed with those who had saved her when she had nothing left, not even her name. The fort's medical orderlies approached the travois, moving efficiently to transfer the wounded Lakota to stretchers. Emma dismounted, her legs stiff from the long ride, and hurried to Singing Bird's side. "You're going to be all right," she told the unconscious woman, squeezing her hand gently. I'll make sure of it. As the stretcher bearers lifted Singing Bird, a commotion near the main building caught Emma's attention. A man burst through the doors, freezing on the steps as his gaze swept the new arrivals. Tall and lean, with dark hair and a beard grown longer in the weeks since she'd seen him last. Nathan. Their eyes met across the crowded yard, and the world seemed to stop. For an eternal moment, neither moved, as if afraid the other might vanish, like a mirage if approached too quickly. Then Nathan was running, pushing through soldiers and civilians alike, his face transformed by disbelieving joy. Emma found herself moving too, drawn forward by a force stronger than conscious thought. They collided in the center of the fort yard, arms wrapping around each other with desperate strength. Nathan's hands cupped her face, his eyes drinking, in every detail as if to reassure himself she was real. Emma, he breathed, her name a prayer on his lips. My God, Emma. She couldn't speak, could only press her forehead against his chest, inhaling the familiar scent of him. Leather and pine and something uniquely Nathan that had lingered in her fractured memories even when all else was lost. I knew you were alive, he murmured into her hair. I knew it. They all said I was chasing ghosts, but I knew. Emma pulled back just enough to look into his face, to trace the new lines that grief and worry had etched around his eyes. I didn't, she admitted softly. Know who I was, I mean, not until recently. Confusion crossed his features, but before she could explain, a soldier approached with urgency. Mrs. Wilson, the Lakota woman is asking for you. The surgeon says it's important. Reality crashed back, the joy of reunion tempered by the reminder of all that remained unresolved. Emma turned to Nathan, torn between staying with him and returning. To Singing Bird's side. He seemed to understand without words, squeezing her hand reassuringly. Go. I'm not going anywhere. We have time now. Emma nodded gratefully, following the soldier toward the infirmary. Behind her, she heard Captain Reynolds addressing Nathan. Mr. Wilson, we need to speak with you about Samuel Blackwood. The Fort Infirmary was a long, low building divided into wards. The Lakota wounded had been placed in a separate section, whether for their comfort or to segregate them. Emma wasn't sure. She found Singing Bird on a narrow cot. The fort surgeon bent over her with a concerned expression. You're Mrs. Wilson? He asked as Emma approached. She's been calling for you. Fever's very high, infection spreading. I've cleaned the wound, as best I can, but... He shook his head grimly. You should prepare yourself. Emma's throat tightened. You have to save her. She saved me when everyone else was dead. She healed me when I had nothing, not even my own name. The surgeon's expression softened slightly. I'll do everything I can, but medicine has its limits. Sometimes all we can do is make the passing easier. He moved away to check on another patient, leaving Emma alone with Singing Bird. The medicine woman's eyes were open, but glazed with fever, her breathing shallow and rapid. Emma took her hand, alarmed by the dry heat of her skin. I'm here, she said softly. Nathan's here too. You were right. He never stopped looking for me. Singing Bird's lips moved, forming words too faint to hear. Emma leaned closer. Must finish, the medicine woman whispered. Story not complete. What story? Emma asked, confused. Save your strength. You need to rest. Singing Bird's fingers tightened around Emma's with surprising strength. Your story, our story, not end with reunion, end with justice. Understanding dawned. Even on what might be her deathbed, Singing Bird was thinking of her people, of the wrongs that still needed to be righted. I promise, Emma said firmly. Blackwood will pay for what he's done. Hayes will testify. I'll testify. Nathan will help us. A hint of a smile touched Singing Bird's cracked lips. Good. Now, medicine. She gestured weakly toward her neck, where a small leather pouch still hung. Not the one Morning Star had given Emma, but Singing Bird's own medicine bag that had somehow remained with her through everything. "Special herbs," she murmured, "for worst wounds. Could not use in cave. Too sacred. Need ceremony." Emma hesitated. The fort surgeon would likely dismiss such traditional medicine, might even forbid its use. But she had seen Singing Birds. Healing skills firsthand, had experienced the potent effectiveness of her remedies. "What do I need to do?" she asked, decision made. Singing Bird's instructions were halting but clear. Certain herbs to be crushed and mixed with clean water, others to be burned so their smoke could be inhaled, specific words to be spoken, a song to be hummed. Emma worked quickly, aware of the risk of interference from the military medical staff. Morning Star found her as she was completing the preparation. The young woman's eyes widened at the sight of the sacred medicine, then filled with tears of gratitude. Without a word, she joined in, her hands moving with the sure knowledge of one who had been trained in these ways since childhood. Together, they administered the treatment, Morning Star singing softly in Lakota, while Emma held Singing Bird upright so she could breathe the healing smoke. The medicine woman's eyes closed, her expression relaxing slightly as the ceremony concluded. "Now we wait," Morning Star said, her voice steady despite her evident fear, "and pray to spirits." Emma nodded, settling beside the cot to maintain her vigil. Outside, she could hear the fort coming to life with the arrival of their party. Orders being shouted, prisoners being processed, wounded being tended. Somewhere among that activity was Nathan, her husband returned to her against all odds. Yet she couldn't leave Singing Bird's side. Not yet. Not when the medicine woman had sacrificed so much to save her life. Whatever happened now, their fates were intertwined. White settler and Lakota healer, unlikely allies in a territory that wanted to keep them enemies. "Rest now," Emma whispered, smoothing a damp strand of silver hair from Singing Bird's forehead. "I'll be here when you wake." "If you wake," her mind added silently, but she pushed the thought away. After all they had survived, after all the blood and loss and pain, surely the spirits, or God, or whatever forces governed the universe, would not be so cruel as to take Singing Bird now. Justice remained unfinished. Blackwood was still free, still believing himself untouchable. The story, as Singing Bird had said, was not yet complete, and Emma Wilson, once lost and now found, was determined to see it through to the end. Fort Laramie bustled with activity as dawn broke over the plains. Emma stood at the infirmary window, watching soldiers drill in the yard, their breath forming clouds in the cold morning air. She had spent the night beside Singing Bird's cot, dozing fitfully in an uncomfortable wooden chair, waking at every change in the medicine woman's labored breathing. The combined efforts of Lakota healing and military medicine had produced cautious optimism. Singing Bird's fever had broken in the small hours of the morning, her skin cooling from burning heat to merely warm. The fort surgeon had grudgingly admitted that her condition had stabilized, though he attributed this to his own treatments rather than the savage rituals he had reluctantly permitted. "You should rest," Nathan said softly, appearing in the doorway with 2 steaming mugs. "You've been here all night." Emma accepted the coffee gratefully, the familiar aroma bringing a rush of domestic memories that seemed to belong to another lifetime. "I couldn't leave her," she replied, "not when she refused to leave me, even when it meant risking her own people." Nathan's expression was complex, understanding mingled with something like jealousy, quickly mastered. He had spent hours listening to Emma's account of her rescue and recovery among the Lakota, asking few questions, absorbing the immensity of what she had endured. The gaps in their shared experience yawned between them like a chasm neither was quite sure how to bridge. "Sheriff Donovan wants to meet with us," he said after a moment. "The fort commander too. They're gathering evidence against Blackwood. Emma nodded, taking a sip of the strong coffee. Hayes still being cooperative? Cooperative might be generous, but he's talking. Seems he's realized Blackwood will sacrifice him without hesitation to save himself. Self-preservation is a powerful motivator. A soft sound from the cot drew their attention. Singing Bird's eyes had opened, clearer now and aware of her surroundings. Her gaze found Emma, then moved to Nathan, studying him with intense scrutiny. "Husband," she said, her voice weak but lucid, "found at last." Nathan approached the bedside, genuine respect in his manner, despite his lingering discomfort with the Lakota woman's influence over his wife. "Ma'am, I understand I owe you my wife's life. I'm in your debt." Singing Bird's lips curved in a faint smile. "No debt. She saved herself, I only showed path." Emma reached for the medicine woman's hand, relieved to find it cooler than the night before. "How do you feel?" "Alive," Singing Bird replied with dry humor. "Surprised." Her expression grew serious as she looked between Emma and Nathan. "Blackwood must be stopped." "We're working on it," Nathan assured her. "I've already given my statement about the gold map he was after. With Hayes's testimony and Emma's eyewitness account, we have a strong case." Singing Bird nodded, but concern lingered in her eyes. "Man like that, dangerous when cornered." Emma couldn't disagree. Samuel Blackwood had already demonstrated his willingness to slaughter entire families, both settler and Lakota, to pursue his ambitions. What else might he do when his freedom and reputation were threatened? "Morning Star will stay with you," she told Singing Bird. "Nathan and I need to meet with the sheriff and the fort commander. We won't be long." The medicine woman squeezed Emma's hand weakly. "Be careful. Trust instincts." Outside the infirmary, the fort hummed with unusual activity. Additional soldiers patrolled the walls, and civilian riders came and went through the main gates with greater frequency than normal. Emma noticed how the military personnel gave her curious glances as she and Nathan crossed the parade ground toward the commander's office. "Word has spread," Nathan explained, noticing her discomfort. "The lost woman from the Wagon Massacre, found living among the Lakota, returning with prisoners and wounded Indians. It's quite a tale." "Is that how they see it? A tale?" Emma asked, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. "Those wounded Indians were victims of the same murderer who killed our friends. They sheltered me when they had every reason to let me die." Nathan stopped, turning to face her fully. "Emma," he said gently, "I understand this is difficult. You've been through something extraordinary, something few white women have experienced. But you need to remember that not everyone will share your perspective on the Lakota. Some will never believe they weren't responsible for the Wagon Massacre, no matter what evidence we present." "Then they're fools," Emma replied, lifting her chin. "And I have no patience for fools, not anymore." A ghost of a smile touched Nathan's lips. "You've changed." It wasn't an accusation, merely an observation. "Yes," she acknowledged. "I have." They continued in silence to the commander's office, a sturdy wooden building near the center of the fort. Inside, they found Sheriff Donovan deep in conversation with a distinguished military officer whose uniform bore the insignia of a colonel. Swift Fox stood nearby, arms crossed defensively, clearly uncomfortable in these surroundings, but determined to represent his people's interests. "Mrs. Wilson, Mr. Wilson," the colonel said, rising to greet them. "I'm Colonel Frederick Hartwood, commander of Fort Laramie. Please be seated." They took chairs around a large map table, joining Donovan and Swift Fox. The colonel remained standing, his posture rigid with military bearing. "Sheriff Donovan has briefed me on the situation," Hartwood began. "I must say, it's one of the most disturbing accounts I've heard in my 20 years on the frontier. If your allegations against Samuel Blackwood are proven true, it represents not only a heinous crime, but a dangerous threat to peaceful relations with the Lakota." Emma noted the careful phrasing. If the allegations were proven true, the Colonel wasn't fully convinced despite the evidence already gathered. With respect, Colonel, she said, meeting his gaze directly. They aren't allegations. They're facts. I was there. I saw Blackwood order the attack on our wagon train. I heard him demand the gold map from my husband. And while I didn't witness him giving the order to massacre the Lakota camp, his enforcer Hayes did so under his authority. Hartwood's expression remained neutral. I understand, Mrs. Wilson, but as a military commander, I must proceed with caution. Blackwood is a prominent citizen with considerable influence in the territory. Arresting him on charges of this magnitude requires irrefutable evidence. Which we have, Sheriff Donovan interjected. Hayes has provided a written statement confirming Blackwood's orders regarding both massacres. We have Mrs. Wilson's eyewitness testimony about the wagon train attack. And we have the bodies, Colonel. Dozens of them, both white settlers and Lakota, killed on Blackwood's orders. Swift Fox spoke up, his voice tightly controlled. My people die. No one care until white women say who killed them. Now you talk, while Blackwood's still free. The young warrior's frustration hung in the air, uncomfortable but undeniably justified. Emma found herself nodding in agreement, despite the Colonel's frown of disapproval. The native gentleman raises a fair point, Nathan said, surprising Emma with his support. Every hour Blackwood remains free is an hour he can use to cover his tracks, silence witnesses, or even flee the territory. He owns property in California. If he reaches it before we act, bringing him to justice becomes exponentially more difficult. Colonel Hartwood sighed, the first crack in his official demeanor. You're not wrong, Mr. Wilson. However, there are protocols to follow. I've dispatched riders to the territorial governor requesting authorization for Blackwood's arrest. Until those orders arrive, my hands are tied. And when will that be? Emma asked, frustration building in her chest. 4 days minimum, the Colonel replied. Weather permitting. 4 days. 4 days in which Blackwood could eliminate evidence, bribe officials, or simply disappear. 4 days in which Hayes might recant his testimony under pressure from Blackwood's allies. 4 days too many. Emma exchanged glances with Nathan, recognizing the same conclusion in his eyes. They couldn't afford to wait for military bureaucracy to grind its slow gears, but challenging the Colonel directly would only entrench his position. I understand, Colonel, she said instead, forcing a conciliatory tone. In the meantime, perhaps we should focus on gathering additional evidence. To strengthen the case, Nathan and I could provide detailed statements about the gold map that motivated the initial attack. Hartwood nodded, visibly relieved by her apparent acceptance. Excellent suggestion, Mrs. Wilson. My adjutant will take your statements immediately. Sheriff Donovan, I'd like you to oversee the continued questioning of the prisoners. Perhaps more details can be extracted that would expedite matters once authorization arrives. As the meeting dispersed, Emma, Nathan, Swift Fox, and Sheriff Donovan found themselves momentarily alone in the hallway outside the Colonel's office. 4 days is too long, Donovan muttered, confirming Emma's fears. By then, Blackwood will have heard about Hayes's capture. He'll know we're coming. Then, we don't wait, Nathan said with quiet determination. Colonel Hartwood may be bound by military protocols, but civilians aren't subject to the same restrictions. What are you suggesting? Emma asked, though she already suspected his answer. Blackwood doesn't know that we know he was behind everything. He believes Emma is dead. The gold map is in his possession, and the Lakota massacre is being blamed on renegade Indians. His guard will be down. Nathan turned to Sheriff Donovan. You said yourself he needs to be brought to justice. The sheriff tugged at his beard thoughtfully. I'm an officer of the law, Wilson. I can't sanction vigilante action, no matter how justified. Not vigilante, justice. Nathan corrected. A citizen's arrest. Emma and I witnessed his crimes firsthand. We have that right under territorial law. Citizen's arrest still requires bringing him back for proper trial, Donovan pointed out. How exactly do you plan to convince a man like Blackwood to accompany you peacefully? Swift Fox, who had been listening silently, spoke up. Not peaceful. Blackwood understand only force. Emma found herself nodding in agreement. Swift Fox is right. Blackwood won't come willingly, but if we could get him to incriminate himself, provide additional evidence. What are you thinking? Nathan asked, studying her face. Blackwood still wants the gold map, doesn't he? He thinks he has it, but what he has is a fake. Emma turned to Nathan. You made a copy, didn't you? Before giving me the original to keep safe during the journey. Understanding dawned in Nathan's eyes. I did. It's not exact, but it would look convincing to someone who hadn't seen the original. But Emma, what you're suggesting is dangerous, she finished for him. I know, but so is waiting for Blackwood to realize Hayes has been captured and that I survived. Sheriff Donovan frowned deeply. Mrs. Wilson, I cannot condone placing yourself in danger. Blackwood has already tried to kill you once. Which is why she won't be alone, Nathan said firmly. If we do this, and I'm not saying we should, it would need to be carefully planned with adequate support. He glanced at Swift Fox. Would your warriors help us if it meant bringing Blackwood to justice for your people? The young Lakota's expression hardened with determination. For my brother. For all who died. Yes. Donovan looked between them, conflict evident on his weathered face. Finally, he sighed heavily. I should arrest the lot of you for conspiracy, but he tugged at his beard again. I did swear an oath to uphold justice. Sometimes the law moves too slowly for justice to be served. Emma felt a surge of hope. Does that mean you'll help us? It means I won't stop you, the sheriff clarified. And it means that if you manage to secure evidence of Blackwood's crimes that would stand up in court, I'll ensure it reaches the right hands. He fixed Nathan with a stern look. But I want your word this isn't about revenge. Justice requires a trial, not frontier justice at the end of a rope. You have my word, Nathan replied solemnly. If we do this, it's to bring Blackwood to face a judge and jury, nothing more. Emma nodded her agreement, though in her heart she wasn't entirely certain. After witnessing the slaughter of innocent families, after seeing Singing Bird fighting for her life because of Blackwood's hatred, could she truly say she didn't want revenge? The line between justice and vengeance had never seemed so thin. Then I suggest you four continue this conversation elsewhere, Donovan said, glancing meaningfully toward the colonel's closed door. What I don't hear, I can't report. They parted ways with the understanding that they would reconvene in a more private location later that day. Emma and Nathan returned to the infirmary to check on Singing Bird, finding her in quiet conversation with Morning Star. The younger woman looked up as they entered, something in their expressions alerting her to the tension they carried. What happened? She asked sharply. Bad news? Not bad exactly, Emma hedged, mindful of Singing Bird's weakened condition. Just complicated. The military wants to wait for official authorization before arresting Blackwood. Singing Bird's eyes narrowed. How long? 4 days, Nathan replied. Maybe longer. The medicine woman shook her head weakly. Too long. Blackwood not wait to hear his men captured. That's what we thought, Emma agreed, sitting beside the cot. We're considering alternatives. Understanding flashed in Singing Bird's eyes. Dangerous plan, she said. Not a question, but a statement. Yes, Emma admitted, but necessary. Morning Star looked between them, worry evident in her young face. You go after Blackwood, he kill you if he can. Not if we're careful, Nathan assured her, and not if we have help. He glanced at Swift Fox, who had followed them into the infirmary. "Your brother believes some of your warriors would be willing to assist us." Morningstar's expression hardened with the same determination her brother had shown. "I go too, for our people." "No," Singing Bird said firmly, reaching for her daughter's hand. "One child risk enough. You stay. Care for wounded." The young woman wanted to argue. Emma could see it in the set of her jaw, but respect for her mother prevailed. She nodded reluctantly. "But others will go, strong warriors who survive attack." "We'll need to plan carefully," Nathan said, lowering his voice in case any military personnel passed by the infirmary door. "Blackwood's ranch is well guarded, and we can't risk raising suspicions by approaching directly." "The trading post," Emma suggested. "Broken Oak Crossing. Martha Collier mentioned that her husband runs the general store. Blackwood must do business there sometimes. It would be a more neutral location, less heavily guarded." Nathan considered. "This, possibly, but how do we lure him there specifically? We need to control the meeting place and time if we're going to gather evidence of his crimes." Swift Fox spoke up. "Gold map. He want most of all, yes? Tell storekeeper you find new gold. Need supplies for mining. Blackwood here, come himself." "That could work," Nathan agreed thoughtfully. Martha Collier seemed sympathetic to Emma. If her husband shares those sentiments, they might be willing to help spread the rumor. "And Blackwood's greed would do the rest," Emma finished. "But what then? Once he appears, how do we get him to incriminate himself?" "That's where this comes in," Nathan said, withdrawing a small object from his pocket. It was a mechanical device, about the size of a pocket watch, with a small crank handle and spool of wire. Thomas Edison exhibited something like this at a demonstration I attended back east. It's called a phonograph, capable of recording sound and playing it back later. Emma stared at the device in amazement. "You can record Blackwood's confession with that?" "In theory," Nathan replied. "I acquired it for geological survey work, to record observations in the field. The quality isn't perfect, but it should be sufficient to capture incriminating statements." The plan began to take shape. Emma and Nathan would travel to Broken Oak Crossing under the pretense of purchasing supplies for a new mining operation. The Colliers would help spread word of their arrival and hints about a significant gold discovery. If Blackwood took the bait, they would maneuver him into making incriminating statements about the Wagon Massacre and the Lakota attack, capturing his words with the phonograph as evidence. Swift Fox would arrange for several warriors to position themselves around the trading post, ready to intervene if Blackwood or his men attempted violence. Sheriff Donovan, while not officially participating, would ensure that any evidence gathered reached the proper authorities, bypassing potential interference from Blackwood's political allies. "It could work," Emma said, hope kindling despite the obvious risks. "But Blackwood has seen me before. He'll recognize me immediately." "Not necessarily," Morningstar interjected. "White men see all Lakota same. Lakota woman," she gestured to Emma's features, "with right clothes, right paint." She smiled faintly. "You already look part Lakota now. Sun in your skin, strength in your eyes." The idea struck Emma with unexpected force. She had spent weeks living as part of the Lakota community, adopting their dress, learning fragments of their language and customs. With proper disguise, she might indeed pass as a mixed heritage woman, not enough to fool another Lakota, but perhaps enough to confuse a man who had only briefly glimpsed her months ago. "A Lakota wife to a white prospector," Nathan mused, following the thread. "It's not unheard of on the frontier. Blackwood's prejudice might actually work in our favor. He'd be less likely to look closely at a native woman, less likely to connect her to the supposedly dead Emma Wilson." Singing Bird watched this exchange with a mixture of approval and concern. "Good plan," she acknowledged, "but still dangerous. Blackwood clever, evil, but clever." "We'll be careful," Emma promised. though she knew the risks could never be fully mitigated. The important thing is bringing him to justice before he can hurt anyone else. Nathan reached across to take her hand, his expression solemn. "You don't have to do this, Emma. I could go alone or with Swift Fox. You've already endured more than anyone should have to." Emma squeezed his hand, appreciating the offer but never considering it. "This is my fight too, Nathan. More than anyone's. I survived the Wagon Massacre. I lived with the Lakota. I witnessed both sides of Blackwood's cruelty. If anyone should face him, it's me." Pride mingled with worry in Nathan's eyes. This was not the same woman he had left behind when he rode ahead to scout for the wagon train. The dutiful wife who had followed his lead without question. The Emma who sat before him now carried herself with a quiet authority born of survival. Against impossible odds, she had made her decision, and he respected her enough not to challenge it. "Then we'll face him together," he said simply. The remainder of the day was spent refining their plan. Maps were consulted, contingencies discussed, options weighed. Swift Fox left to speak with the other Lakota warriors, securing their commitment to the dangerous undertaking. Nathan worked on the phonograph, ensuring it would function properly when needed, while Emma consulted with Morning Star about appropriate disguise. By evening, a coherent strategy had emerged. They would depart for Broken Oak Crossing the following morning, traveling with a small group of Lakota warriors who would separate before reaching the settlement, circling around to establish hidden positions. Emma, disguised as a mixed heritage woman named White Dove, would accompany Nathan into town, where they would make a conspicuous show of purchasing mining supplies and discussing their discovery within earshot of carefully chosen listeners. The rest would depend on Blackwood's response. Would his greed overcome his caution? Would he recognize Emma despite her disguise? Would the phonograph capture enough evidence to ensure his conviction? As night fell over Fort Laramie, Emma stood alone at the infirmary window, watching stars emerge in the vast prairie sky. Tomorrow, they would ride toward confrontation with the man who had ordered the deaths of so many. Success would mean justice for the fallen. Failure could mean joining them. "Afraid?" a soft voice asked behind her. Singing Bird had awakened, her keen eyes reading Emma's posture even in the dim light. "Yes," Emma admitted, turning from the window. "Not of dying exactly, but of failing, of Blackwood escaping justice." The medicine woman nodded, understanding perfectly. "Fear is wisdom sometimes, keeps us alive." Her lips curved in a faint smile. "You live because you are afraid enough to run from Jed. Blackwood lived because others fear him more than justice." "Not anymore," Emma said with quiet determination. "Tomorrow that changes." "Yes." Singing Bird's expression grew serious. "But remember, man, who corners wolf creates most dangerous enemy. Blackwood not surrender easy." "I know." Emma returned to the bedside, taking the older woman's hand. "But neither will I." Singing Bird studied her face in the moonlight streaming through the window. "You good student," she said finally. "Learn fast, survive, adapt." "I had a good teacher," Emma replied, throat tight with emotion. The medicine woman's eyes drifted closed, strength ebbing as her body continued its slow healing. "When this end," she murmured, "you must choose path. Not white woman, not Lakota, something new, both worlds in your heart now." The observation struck Emma with unexpected force. She hadn't considered what would come after Blackwood's capture, hadn't looked beyond the immediate goal of justice. But Singing Bird was right. She straddled two worlds now, belonging fully to neither. What place would she find in the territory's future? What place would there be for the Lakota survivors once the immediate crisis passed? These questions followed her as she left the infirmary to find Nathan, who was making final preparations for their journey. He looked up as she approached, concern crossing his features at her troubled expression. Having second thoughts? He asked quietly. No, Emma replied. Just thinking about what comes afterward, if we succeed. Nathan set aside the maps he'd been studying, giving her his full attention. And what do you see afterward? Emma hesitated, uncertain how to express the conflict within her. I don't know yet. I'm not the same woman who left Independence with you, Nathan. The experiences I've had with the Lakota, the things I've learned, they've changed me. I can see that, he said gently, and I don't expect you to be unchanged after everything you've endured. But will there be a place for me? For us? She gestured vaguely, encompassing not just herself and Nathan, but the larger questions of their future in a territory scarred by violence and prejudice. Nathan considered her question seriously, not offering immediate reassurance, but genuinely, wrestling with the implications. It was one of the qualities she had always loved about him, his willingness to engage with difficult questions rather than dismiss them. I think, he said finally, that we build our place in this world through our choices and actions. The territory is changing. The relations between settlers and native tribes are changing. Perhaps there's an opportunity in that change for something new to emerge. Something that honors both worlds, Emma suggested, echoing singing birds. Insight. Why not? Nathan reached for her hand. The gold we discovered, it could provide resources to help the Lakota survivors rebuild, or to establish something different, something that brings people together rather than dividing them. The idea resonated with something deep within Emma, a vision of possibility beyond the immediate horizon of confrontation and justice. But such dreams would remain nothing more than mist, unless they first succeeded in their dangerous mission. One step at a time, she said, squeezing Nathan's hand. First, Blackwood must answer for his crimes. Then we can think about building something new. He nodded, understanding the necessity of focus. You should rest. Tomorrow will test us both. Emma knew he was right, yet sleep seemed an impossible luxury with so much at stake. She returned to the infirmary one last time to check on Singing Bird, finding the medicine woman sleeping peacefully, her breathing steadier than before. Morning Star sat beside her mother, maintaining her own vigil. You ready for tomorrow? The young woman asked softly. As ready as I can be, Emma replied, touching the small medicine pouch Morning Star had given her, still hanging around her neck. Good. Morning Star's dark eyes held both wisdom and sorrow beyond her years. My brother say you fight well, heart of warrior in woman's body. Emma shook her head slightly. Not a warrior. Just someone who's learned that sometimes survival requires fighting back. Same thing, Morning Star said with a small smile. Different words. They shared a moment of understanding that transcended language and culture. Two young women, shaped by loss and resilience, finding strength in unlikely places. Then Emma bid her goodnight, returning to the small quarters she shared with Nathan for what might be their last peaceful night together. Tomorrow they would ride to confront Samuel Blackwood, architect of so much bloodshed. Tomorrow they would seek justice for the fallen of both worlds. Tomorrow they would learn whether their careful planning would yield success or disaster. But tonight, Emma allowed herself one moment of quiet hope, not just for survival, but for the possibility of something beyond survival. A future built on understanding rather than hatred, on respect rather than fear, a future worthy of all they had endured to reach this point. As she drifted towards sleep beside Nathan's familiar warmth, Emma found herself humming the healing song Singing Bird had taught her. Tomorrow would bring danger and confrontation. Tonight, at least, there was healing and hope. The journey to Broken Oak Crossing began at dawn, a small party leaving Fort Laramie with minimal fanfare. Emma rode beside Nathan, her transformation complete. Morning Star had worked through the night, applying natural pigments to darken Emma's skin, braiding her hair with Lakota beads, and dressing her in traditional buckskin clothing adapted with subtle settler influences. A quick glance would reveal a mixed heritage woman, not the Emma Wilson whom Blackwood believed dead. "How do you feel?" Nathan asked as they rode, studying her altered appearance with fascination. "Like myself," Emma replied, surprising them, both with the truth in her words. The disguise didn't feel like deception, but rather an outward manifestation of her inner transformation. Part of her belonged to the Lakota world now, just as part remained tied to her settler origins. Swift, Fox rode ahead with 3 warriors who had survived the camp massacre. Their faces were painted for battle, though they wore blankets over their traditional garb to avoid attracting undue attention from settlers they might encounter. They would split from the main party before reaching Broken Oak Crossing, circling around to take positions in the hills overlooking the settlement. The phonograph was carefully packed in Nathan's saddlebags, along with the false gold map that would serve as bait. Sheriff Donovan had provided official-looking documents identifying Nathan as a prospector with legal mining rights, adding legitimacy to their cover story. By mid-afternoon, they reached the point where the Lakota warriors would separate from the main group. Swift Fox dismounted, approaching Emma and Nathan with solemn intensity. "We watch from hills," he said, gesturing toward the rocky terrain that surrounded Broken Oak Crossing in the distance. "See signal, come fast." "Thank you," Emma replied in Lakota, the words coming more naturally to her tongue than she had expected. "May the spirits protect you." Swift Fox nodded, then surprised them both by offering his hand to Nathan in the white man's tradition. "For justice," he said simply. Nathan clasped the offered hand firmly. "For justice," he echoed, "and for a better future." The Lakota warriors rode away, quickly disappearing among the rocky outcroppings that dotted the landscape. Emma and Nathan continued toward the settlement, rehearsing their roles one final time. "Remember," Nathan cautioned, "if Blackwood appears, let me do most of the talking initially. Your accent when speaking English needs to be convincing." Emma nodded, though her heart rebelled at the thought of remaining silent in Blackwood's presence. She had practiced the broken English that would be expected from a mixed heritage woman with limited education, but maintaining the deception while facing the man who had ordered so much death would test her control to its limits. Broken Oak Crossing appeared much as Emma remembered it, a rough collection of buildings strung along a central thoroughfare, the general store prominent among them. As they rode into town, she felt eyes tracking their progress, curious stares. From porches and windows, "Word of our arrival preceded us," Nathan murmured. "Good. The more witnesses to Blackwood's behavior, the better." They dismounted outside the general store, tying their horses to the hitching post. Nathan helped Emma down with deliberate tenderness, playing the role of a doting husband to his native wife. The small gesture of affection wasn't entirely feigned. After their long separation and all they had endured, the simple touch carried genuine emotional weight. Inside the store, Martha Collier looked up from arranging merchandise, recognition flashing in her eyes at the sight of Emma despite the disguise. The storekeeper's wife recovered quickly, giving no sign to other customers that she recognized anything unusual about the pair. "Welcome to Collier's General Store," she greeted them with practiced hospitality. "What can I help you with today?" Nathan stepped forward, speaking just loudly enough to be overheard by the other patrons. "Name's Wilson. Nathan Wilson. My wife and I need supplies for a mining operation, something promising up in the North Hills." "Mining supplies are in the back corner," Martha replied, playing along perfectly. "My husband Thomas can assist you with the heavier equipment. I'm afraid good pickaxes are in short supply these days." That's all right," Nathan said, producing a small pouch that clinked with the unmistakable sound of gold nuggets. "We're prepared to pay premium for quality tools. Found a promising vein, didn't we, White Dove? Emma nodded, keeping her eyes appropriately downcast, as would be expected of a native woman in a white establishment. Good gold, she said in carefully broken English. Much gold. The other customers in the store had grown noticeably quiet, attention fixed on Nathan's pouch and Emma's exotic appearance. A prospector with native wife and new gold strike was precisely the kind of frontier gossip that would spread like wildfire, and straight to Samuel Blackwood. Thomas Collier emerged from the storeroom, wiping his hands on his apron. His eyes met his wife's in silent communication before he approached Nathan with an outstretched hand. Thomas Collier, at your service. Mining supplies, is it? Found something worth digging for, have you? Nathan shook the offered hand. You could say that. Something my wife's people knew about for generations. Sacred place, but she's chosen to share it with me. He patted the false map in his pocket meaningfully. Best color I've seen in years. The performance continued as they selected picks, shovels, pans, and other mining necessities. Nathan made a show of examining each tool meticulously, rejecting several as insufficient for their needs. All the while, he dropped hints about the scale of their discovery, the direction of their claim, the potential wealth waiting to be extracted. By the time they'd completed their purchases and arranged for the supplies to be held until the following day, half the settlement would have heard about the mysterious prospector and his Lakota wife with their significant gold strike in the North Hills. That should do it, Thomas Collier murmured as he wrapped their smaller purchases. Word will reach Blackwood before nightfall. He keeps men in town to report anything interesting. Uber perfect, Nathan replied quietly. Is the room ready? Upstairs, end of the hall. Window faces the main street, so you'll see him coming. Martha will show you up. Emma followed Martha up a narrow staircase to a small but clean room above the store. The window, as promised, provided a clear view of Broken Oak Crossing's main thoroughfare. Anyone approaching the general store would be visible well before they arrived. Are you sure about this? Martha asked once they were alone, genuine concern in her voice. Blackwood is a dangerous man. When he discovers he's been deceived, we're sure, Emma replied, dropping the broken English now that no one else could hear. He's responsible for killing dozens of innocent people, both settlers and Lakota. He has to be stopped. Martha nodded, though worry remained etched in her features. Thomas and I will do what we can to help. Just be careful. She hesitated, then added, Your disguise is remarkable. I almost didn't recognize you when you first entered the store. Emma touched the beads woven into her braids, thinking of morning. Star's careful work. It's not entirely a disguise anymore, she said softly. Part of me belongs to both worlds now. As evening approached, Nathan set up the phonograph in their room, concealing it behind a folding screen where it would capture conversations without being immediately visible. He tested the mechanism, recording and playing back his own voice, to ensure it functioned properly. Now we wait, he said, joining Emma at the window as the settlement's lamps began to flicker to life in the gathering dusk. The wait proved shorter than anticipated. Less than 2 hours after their performance in the general store, a group of riders appeared at the far end of the main street. Even at a distance, Samuel Blackwood was unmistakable, tall and broad-shouldered, his black coat and hat making him appear like a dark specter against the sunset-painted landscape. He's here, Emma whispered, her heart accelerating as memories of the Wagon Massacre surfaced unbidden. The screams, the gunfire, the blood-soaked snow. Nathan squeezed her hand, reassuringly. Remember the plan, let him incriminate himself. We need his confession on the phonograph to ensure justice. Emma nodded, taking a steadying breath as she watched Blackwood and 4 men dismount outside the saloon across the street. The land developer spoke briefly to his companions before they entered the establishment. He'll gather information first, Nathan predicted. Find out what the locals know about us before making his approach. Sure enough, nearly an hour passed before there was a knock at their door. Thomas Collier stood in the hallway, his expression grave. "Blackwood's asking about you downstairs," he reported. "Wanted to know all about the new prospector and his Indian wife. Seemed particularly interested in the location of your claim." Nathan nodded. "Good. Tell him we're retiring early, planning to head back to our claim at dawn. But mention that we might be interested in discussing a business arrangement with someone who has the capital to develop a major strike." "That should bring him straight to you," Thomas agreed. "Be careful, he brought men with him." "Our friends are watching," Emma assured him, thinking of Swift Fox and his warriors positioned in the hills around the settlement. "If anything happens, they'll intervene." Thomas departed, and they resumed their vigil. Less than 15 minutes later, Blackwood himself emerged from the saloon, glancing up at the windows of the general store before crossing the street with purposeful strides. Two of his men followed at a discreet distance, positioning themselves near the entrance. "Places," Nathan murmured, moving to activate the phonograph behind the screen. Emma adjusted her disguise one final time, assuming the posture and demeanor of White Dove, the submissive Lakota wife. The knock, when it came, was firm and confident, the knock of a man accustomed to doors opening at his command. Nathan opened it, revealing Samuel Blackwood in all his imposing presence. "Mr. Wilson?" Blackwood inquired smoothly. "Samuel Blackwood. I understand you've made quite the discovery in our hills." "Word travels fast," Nathan replied, playing the cautious prospector. "Please come in." Blackwood entered, his gaze sweeping the room before settling on Emma. She kept her eyes lowered, though every instinct screamed to confront him openly. This was the man who had ordered her friends murdered, who had authorized the slaughter of an entire Lakota camp. Her hand itched for the knife concealed in her belt. "Your wife, I presume," Blackwood said, making no effort to hide his disdain for her apparent heritage. "White Dove," Nathan confirmed. "Her people knew of this gold. Deposit for generations. Considered it sacred, but times are changing." "Indeed they are," Blackwood agreed, seating himself uninvited in the room's only chair, the old ways giving way to progress. "I'd be interested in hearing more about this deposit you found. Perhaps we could come to a mutually beneficial arrangement." Nathan produced the false map, unfolding it with deliberate care on the small table. "It's here, about 15 miles north. Rich vein, running deep. Too much for a single prospector to develop fully." Blackwood studied the map, his expression betraying nothing. "Interesting location, not far from where I had some troublesome encounters recently." "Troublesome?" Nathan prompted. "Indians," Blackwood said dismissively. "A Lakota camp that harbored criminals. Had to be dealt with." Emma felt her muscles tense. Dealt with, such a cold euphemism for massacre. "I heard about some violence in the territory," Nathan said carefully. "A wagon train attacked some months back as well." Blackwood's eyes narrowed slightly. "Terrible. Business. Savages attacking innocent settlers." He glanced at Emma with barely disguised contempt. "No offense to your wife, of course." "Of course," Nathan agreed, his own tension masked behind a prospector's practical demeanor. "Those events make me concerned about the security of any mining operation. A man with your resources could provide protection that I couldn't manage alone." The bait was set. Blackwood leaned forward slightly, greed overcoming caution. "I have considerable influence in this territory, Mr. Wilson. The right connections with both civilian authorities and the military. Any operation under my protection would be quite secure from interference." "The kind of security that wasn't available to the Wilson wagon train?" Nathan asked, the question casual but pointed. Something flickered in Blackwood's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, at the specific reference. The Wilson massacre was unfortunate but instructive. Instructive how? Nathan pressed. Blackwood studied him for a moment, then seemed to reach a decision. Instructive in the sense that resources in this territory belong to those with the vision and strength to claim them. The Wilsons found something valuable, as I understand it, but they lacked the capacity to properly develop it. So the rumors are true. They found gold. Nathan's question was perfectly pitched between curiosity and avarice. They found a map, Blackwood replied, his voice dropping despite the apparent privacy of their conversation. A map not unlike this one, pointing to a significant deposit. Nathan Wilson was a geologist of some reputation. If he claimed to have found gold, I'm inclined to believe it was there. What happened to the map after the attack? Nathan's hand casually moved toward his coat pocket, where a small derringer was concealed. Blackwood smiled thinly. It came into my possession. Unfortunately, it proved incomplete. Wilson was clever enough to create a version with crucial details missing. The real map died with his wife. His gaze drifted to Emma. You remind me a little of her, something about the eyes. Emma's heart froze. Had he recognized her despite the disguise? Funny, Nathan said, tension evident beneath his casual tone. I've been told I bear a striking resemblance to Nathan Wilson himself. Comprehension dawned in Blackwood's eyes, followed immediately by calculation. His hand moved toward his own concealed weapon, but Nathan was faster, the derringer appearing, as if by magic. Don't, Nathan warned. You're being recorded, Blackwood. Every word about the wagon train, about the map, about my wife. It's all evidence now. Blackwood's face contorted with fury. You're making a grave mistake. My men are right outside. And Lakota warriors surround this settlement, Emma said, dropping all pretense of broken English. The survivors of the camp you ordered destroyed. They've been waiting for justice. Recognition finally reached Blackwood's eyes as he took in Emma's true identity beneath the disguise. Impossible. You died in the snow. Like many of your victims, I survived, Emma replied, rising to face him directly. Enough to testify about everything I saw and heard, enough to ensure you hang for your crimes. Blackwood's composure cracked. With surprising speed for such a large man, he lunged toward Nathan, knocking the derringer aside as it discharged harmlessly into the ceiling. The two men crashed into the table, grappling for control. Emma didn't hesitate, the knife from her belt was in her hand instantly, its bone handle familiar against her palm. Singing bird's gift, a weapon for protection rather than aggression. She didn't stab Blackwood, but placed the blade against his throat as Nathan pinned him against the wall. Enough, she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. It's over, Blackwood. The door burst open. Thomas, Collier appearing with a shotgun, followed almost immediately by Swift Fox and another warrior who had been watching from nearby. Sheriff Donovan is on his way, Thomas announced. Military escort too. Blackwood, trapped between Nathan's grip and Emma's knife, glared at them with pure hatred. You think this ends here? I own judges from here to California. No court will convict me on the word of a grieving widow and some savages. They will with this, Nathan said, retrieving the phonograph from behind the screen. Your own words, Blackwood, admission of taking the map, knowledge of the massacre, everything. For the first time, genuine fear flickered across the land developer's face. Swift Fox approached, staring at Blackwood with the cold intensity of one who had lost family to the man's cruelty. Justice comes, he said simply, for my brother, for all who died. Boots thundered on the stairs, and Sheriff Donovan appeared. In the doorway, flanked by soldiers from Fort Laramie, he surveyed the scene with grim satisfaction. Samuel Blackwood, he announced formally, you're under arrest for the murders of the Wilson wagon train party and the attack on the Lakota winter camp. As the soldiers took Blackwood into custody, Emma felt a curious lightness spread through her body. The confrontation had unfolded not with violence but with truth. Justice served not through vengeance, but through exposing Blackwood's own words to the light. She turned to Swift Fox, who watched Blackwood being led away with complex emotions playing across his young face. "It won't bring them back," she said softly in Lakota, "but their spirits can rest knowing he will face judgment." "Yes," Swift Fox agreed, though his eyes remained troubled. "But what of my people? Justice for the dead means little if the living still suffer." It was a question Emma had no easy answer for. But as she stood beside Nathan, watching Blackwood's defeat, she felt the first stirrings of purpose beyond survival, beyond justice. Perhaps there was a path forward that honored both worlds she now inhabited, a bridge between cultures that began with understanding and respect. The gold that had sparked so much bloodshed might now serve a different purpose. With Nathan's geological expertise and her unique position between two worlds, perhaps they could forge something new from the ashes of tragedy, a future worthy of those who hadn't lived to see it. As the sun set over Broken Oak Crossing, Emma took Nathan's hand, ready at last to look beyond vengeance toward hope. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.